Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3, the game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. It is a Fireball Hot Take Friday, and of course, we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. The chairman of the board, David Reed, is here with us today. Hello, David Reed.
Hello, Jared.
So there's a tradition I started last year. So I don't know if that counts as a tradition or not. You guys, I guess, would have to tell me if that actually counts as a tradition. But something that we did last year that I thoroughly enjoyed was we did these mock draft simulations, because last year in January of 2024, I think I became a subscriber to Pro Football Focus. It's not the thing I'm most proud of in my life, but it is the reality. So I became a subscriber, which means that I had access to the PFF mock draft simulator. And I, like anybody else who spent any time playing around with that thing, I got into it. And so what we did last year, if you'll remember, is we would basically simulate. You would use the PFF mock draft simulator. We'd simulate the first 6 picks and put the Titans on the clock at 7. And talk about potential trades and teams that were making offers and what they would accept. And that led us to these wild topics. And I remember last year, I believe the topic was, in one of the mock draft simulations, Drake May was still on the board with the 7th pick, which obviously would have never happened. But you have to be prepared for every scenario. And it turned into this entire dialogue with you people out there about why would you take Drake May when you have Will Levis? And I thoroughly enjoyed that debate and that discussion. And that just reminds us where we are. Now, as far as the mock drafts are concerned and the simulations and everything else, it's not as much fun as it was last year, this year, because we know who the Titans are going to pick number 1 overall. So here's what I've decided we're going to do. We're going to run the mock draft simulation just like we did last year, but we're going to focus on pick number 35 and the potential trades that the Titans may be able to garner at pick 35, or the players that may be available at pick number 35. And then we have to decide, what do we want to do? What do we want to trade? What do we want to? So without further ado, it is time for our first, because 1 week from today is day 2 of the draft. This is where it gets interesting for the Titans. And so we will have our first of many mock draft simulations to go over every potential possibility of what the Titans are going to do at pick number 35. Okay, Titans are on the clock. Number 1 overall, we already know they're drafting Cam Ward, the quarterback of Miami. Okay, Titans are on the clock at 35, and there are 29 trade offers that have come in for the 35th pick. 29. The entire league is trying to get up to pick number 35. Here are the top players on the board. Defensive tackle, Omar Norman Lott out of Tennessee. Safety, Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State. Now, he's got some injury questions with him. Corner, Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame. Wide receiver, Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. Edge rusher, Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. And safety, Xavier Watts out of Notre Dame. Now, TD swears by Landon Jackson, who, by the way, was on Talking with TD this past week. But in this instance, with these players available, there is not a guy that I'm just saying, oh, I got to have him and screw the 3rd round or screw another 2nd round pick or whatever. None of these guys, Norman Lott, Winston, Morrison, Higgins, Jackson, Watts, none of these guys are so valuable that I'm like, I got to have one of them. So I want to trade down. And so I look at, okay, who's got in a close enough range to where I would be happy with the Titans being able to trade back, but still get a player that I would really, really like and pick up a 3rd round pick at the least. And everybody wants the pick. But the first team that made sense And an offer that I feel like, you know what? I think I could do this. The Jets at 42. So I'm dropping down 7 spots. The Jets at 42 are willing to make the trade by throwing 73. So that's at the top half of the third round. So now I'm back in the third round, but I'm dropping 7 spots. And now I'm no longer on the clock. The Jets are on the clock. I offered the Jets 35 for 42 and 73, and they accepted. Now, that being said, Landon Jackson, if he was there at 42, because he was there at 35, if Landon Jackson was there at 42, he'd be the pick. If Jaden Higgins was there at 42, he'd be the pick. Landon Jackson goes at 39. Jaden Higgins goes at 40 to New Orleans. Titans on the clock at 42. Now, again, the rest of the league apparently wants this pick because I've got 26 teams that are interested in calling and talking about the pick. Now, how badass would that be if the Titans traded this pick twice? Dallas at 44. I'm at 42. Dallas at 44 wants to trade. The best players available on the board. Norman Lott, again, the defensive lineman out of Tennessee. Kevin Winston Jr., the safety out of Penn State. Benjamin Morrison, the corner out of Notre Dame. Maxwell Hairston, a corner out of Kentucky. And Siobhan Ravel, a corner out of ECU. Now, corner could be a position of need, as we all know, because of the L'Jarius Sneed situation. But if there's all these corners on the board, I can probably trade back. So Dallas is wanting the pick. They want to move up 2 spots. I don't know why. Dallas is interested. So my first offer to Dallas is this. 42 and 120, which is in the 4th round. That is the Seattle pick for Ernest Jones. 42 and 120 to Dallas for 44 and 76. So now I'm trying to get 2 third-round picks. Dallas declined. I said, okay. What if I give them 103, which is my top 4th-round pick for 44 and 76? Dallas declined. I'm running out of time on the clock, so now I go to Indy at 45. They want the pick. They've got pick 80. Would they do the same deal? No. Would they do the same deal again? No. Arizona at 47 calls. I want 47-78. Again, I'm trying to get 2 third-round picks out of this. And I offered 120 and 167 in the 6th round. Arizona said no. So I tried my hardest. To get that extra 3rd-rounder. Couldn't do it. Time is up. The pick is due. The Titans are on the clock. And with the 42nd pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Tennessee Titans select Braden Swinson, an edge rusher out of LSU. Swinson had 8 sacks last season. He's got good measurables. They say his biggest issue is in run defense. Well, we can teach him how to set the edge, but we cannot teach him how to get to the quarterback. But we're still picking on Friday night because we've traded back. We've added the 3rd-round pick. Titans are now on the clock at 73 in the 3rd round. Top players available. Olafemi Oladejo out of UCLA. He's a pass rusher. Andrew Makuba, a safety out of Texas. Kyle Williams, a wide receiver out of Washington State, teammates with Cam Ward. And Mason Taylor, the tight end at LSU. And I like both Williams and Taylor. So I got to see who wants to trade. San Francisco wants to trade. They're 2 picks behind. Again, I'm on the clock now at 73. San Francisco at 75 wants to move up. Let's see what they got. Here's the offer. San Francisco gives me 75. I've moved back 2 spots and gives me 100 at the end of the 3rd round. They get 73 and 120. I'm moving back 2 spots in the 3rd, and I'm moving up 20 spots out of the 4th into the 3rd. They accept it. Titans on the clock now at 75. Neither Kyle Williams nor Mason Taylor go off the board. Titans on the clock at 75. Tennessee selects Kyle Williams, the wide receiver out of Washington State. And we still have one more pick left because, again, we got pick number 100 at the end of the third round by moving back those two spots. The top players available: Austin Gelati, the edge out of Louisville; DJ Giddens, running back at Kansas State. Don't need a running back. Anthony Belton, a tackle at NC State; and Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end at Bowling Green. Now, if you listened to me at all yesterday, if you've listened to me at all recently, if you've listened at all, I cannot stand Chigakonkwo. Again, I'm not going to put all my eggs in Harold Fannin's basket. Like Harold Fannin is all of a sudden Brock Bowers. But he is on the clock. He is available. And at pick number 100, Tennessee selects Harold Fannin Jr., tight end out of Bowling Green. So, 1 week from today, you all go to bed in our first mock draft simulation with Cam Ward, number 1 overall, Braden Swinson out of LSU at pick number 42 overall, Kyle Williams, the wide receiver out of Washington State, at pick number 75, and Harold Fannin, the tight end out of Bowling Green, at pick number 100. How do you feel? And that is our first Stillman and Company mock draft simulation. And we will continue to do one a day, every day until Friday. Because once again, it's not as much fun. We know who the Titans are taking at number 1. But if you went to bed a week from today and you wake up and the Titans have Cam Ward, Braden Swinson, Kyle Williams, and Harold Fannin, how would you feel? And I feel like that's checking a lot of boxes. You got the quarterback. You've got an edge rusher, you've got a receiver, and you got a tight end. Still need help at corner, still probably a little bit more help at receiver, certainly depth inside backer. But I think that's a grand slam if the Titans are able to work those kind of trades. So that was our first mock draft simulation as to what will go down on night 2 of the draft. Because as far as I'm concerned, night 2 is far more interesting and far more important than night number 1. But right now, I actually feel pretty good about that first simulation and what the Titans come away with. Your reaction, 615-737-1025 here on the program. That's 615-737-1025. There's about 3 players that if they were available with the 35th pick, that I would run to the podium and not even think about it. If they're not there, I'm trading down out of 35. But there's one thing that you are going to hate, and it's easy today to say, trade down, trade down, trade down. It's much harder to do when you're actually on the clock at 35. 1 week from today, you will not want to trade down as much as you probably want to trade down today, and I will explain why that is. And we'll do that next. Plus your reaction, 615-737-1025 on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. It's Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 The Game.
I'm very uncomfortable with what has happened with Shador Sanders. I understand it's the NFL draft, and I understand things happen, and you evaluate, you scout, you see what you see. I get that part. We talked about Cam Ward. We went literally from talking about whether or not him or Cam Ward should be the number 1 overall pick, to Shador Sanders being a top 3 pick, to Shador Sanders possibly falling to number 6. Then we hear number 9 at New Orleans. Now we're talking about the Steelers at number 21. What the hell happened? Last time I checked, he ain't playing any games. He ain't playing any games. Had a pro day that went pretty well. What did he do to drop? And see, I listened to you. I've listened to Prime speaking about this in the past. And of course, Louis Riddick speaking about this. And here's the thing that I want to use this as an opportunity to remind everybody. Primetime Deion Sanders might be the greatest athlete, clearly one of the greatest athletes that we've ever seen in history. Best cornerback ever. We got that part. You know what Ryan Clark and Louis Riddick and others raved about? All the bravado and all of this other stuff, the professionalism, the dedication, the excellence and commitment, all of these intangibles that supposedly we look for in any athlete, especially the quarterback. This brother seems to have it. And as the days progress, his stature or his status seems to dwindle. I find it inexplicable. I find it alarming. And I find it like almost insulting from the standpoint that this is Deion Sanders' son we're talking about here.
Stephen A. Smith, he's already mad, already kind of making some excuses if Shador Sanders doesn't go high in the draft. And I played that cut for a specific reason, and I'm going to tell you why. Because as of right now, it looks like Shador Sanders is falling. Now we're talking about 21 to the Steelers. I saw a report on Twitter that said that he met with the Steelers. Again, I don't know who reported it. And it could have been Adam Schefter reporting it, and it doesn't make it any more true or not true. But I saw a rumor on Twitter that the Steelers' meetings with Shador Sanders did not go well. So the Steelers may not be interested at 21. Now, again, who knows because of Aaron Rodgers and who's going to be their quarterback. But the reason I played that cut is this. Because 1 week from today, on Friday night, the Tennessee Titans are on the clock at pick number 35. And what is going to happen, and many of you are going to say that, hey, trade down, get back in the 3rd round, get maybe an extra 6th rounder as well. Trade down. If you're not going to trade down the Cam Ward pick to reload the draft kitty, you're going to have to do so maybe at 35. But here's what that pick will do. It will cost you 1st round leftovers. Right now, it's easy to say trade down. And I look at a team like Buffalo that's got 2 second-round picks. Seattle has 2 second-round picks. And I am foaming at the mouth for the opportunity to be able to get 2 second-round picks and to flip 35. But every year, there's a player or two. Maybe this year it's Shador Sanders. But every year or two, there's a player that every single mock draft tells us is going in the 1st round. Maybe going in the top 16 every single year. And then the draft happens. And as that player keeps waiting and waiting and waiting, ESPN cameras keep panning to them, and they keep staying at the top of Mel's best available at the bottom of the TV screen, and then they don't get drafted. And then the next day, everyone's trying to figure out, why didn't Will Levis get drafted? Why didn't Malik Willis get drafted? Why didn't this guy that every single person and their grandma thought was a 1st round pick, people thought he was going 14 overall, he fell out of the 1st round? That happens every single year in the draft. And I cannot predict who that will be this year. The guys that I kind of highlight, as I say, hey, this could be a falling guy right here. Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher out of Texas A&M, has all the measurables off the charts, the combine testing, the Senior Bowl tape, but no production at A&M. I could see him falling out of the first round, even though some people think he might be a top 10 pick. James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee, first round player, but off the field issues, maybe he slides out of round number 1. Hell, it could be Teteroa McMillan, the wide receiver at Arizona, who is big and he was productive and he's got a huge catch radius and he looks like a star receiver. He ran a 4.55 at his pro day, did not run at the combine. And some of you will say, well, that doesn't matter, Jared. I'm telling you, that matters. Matthew Golden was an into the first round guy. He ran a 4.29 at the combine. He's going in the top 15. Teteroa McMillan was considered a top 10 guy, and he didn't run at the combine, and he ran at best a 4.55. Might have been, I think some scouts had 4.57. Again, the difference between 4.4 and 4.5, A.J. Brown, 4.49. Treylon Burks, 4.55. I heard Bill Polian say it a couple weeks ago on Sirius XM. Bill Polian said he would not at Indianapolis take a receiver that did not run a 4.51 or higher. And you would say, well, I mean, what's the difference? A 4.51? 4.51, A.J. Brown qualifies. Treylon Burks does not. So if McMillan is a 4.55, he could be falling because all these teams could be saying, you know what? We like his catch radius. We like the fact that he's a bigger guy, but he's not fast. Luther Burden, 4.41. Emeka Ibuka at his pro day ran under 4.5. This guy didn't. So I can't tell you who it's going to be, but there's going to be one of these guys, two of these guys, I don't know who, that are going to be sitting there at 35. And if you are desperate for a trade down, which again, I think you are, if you're going to the media and you're saying, hey, our goal is to have 12 picks in the top 100 of the next 3 drafts. And right now you have 2. You've got to figure a way to manufacture more top 100 picks. The way to do that is to trade back, but you're not trading back at number 1 because you're taking Cam Ward. So you've got to trade back with your second pick at 35. But again, right now, it's easy in theory for me to say trade back at 35. In our mock draft simulation, the one we did, we traded back from 35 to 42 with the Jets, and we picked up 73. But it's going to be a lot harder a week from today when we're looking at the board after round 1 and we're saying, holy crap, Jahade Barron, the corner out of Texas that some people think is a first rounder, he's still available. Why? Because he's got short arms. And apparently only Trent McDuffie has had his measurables and been a good player. Oh my God, the Titans need an inside backer, and Jahad Campbell from Alabama has fallen out of the first round because he's got some injury concerns. What do you think? So that's going to happen. The first round leftovers, and I don't know who it's going to be. Now, if it's Shador Sanders, that's one thing. It's not going to matter to you because you don't need a quarterback. You're taking Cam Ward. But that's one thing that I'm going to keep reminding everybody when it comes to trading down at 35. Because where I sit today, I think you got to trade down at 35. But there's going to be somebody there. And I've said outside of the consensus top 15 players. So forget about like if Tyler Warren falls and take him. Take any of the consensus top 15 players. Don't care who. Take Mason Graham. Take Ashton Genty. Take Will Johnson. Take them all. But outside of the consensus top 15 players, the guys that I would take at 35 and would not consider a trade out for, Matthew Golden, Emeka Ibuka, Colston Loveland, the tight end out of Michigan. He won't be there, but if he's there, I'm taking him. And then after that, I probably am going to tell you got to trade the pick. But it'll be a lot harder. It will be a lot harder 1 week from today because there will be somebody, I don't know who, there will be somebody that falls out of the first round that everybody thinks is a first rounder. Not like Donovan Ezaraku, who some people think is a first rounder. Some people don't think is a first rounder. Not like Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. Some people think he's a first rounder. Some people don't think there's gonna be someone who everybody thinks is a first rounder who doesn't go. And at 35, you're going to be seeing this. Oh my God, we could have Teteroa McMillan. And I'm still trading the pick. 615-737-1025. We'll get to your phones at 615-737-1025. Again, our first mock draft simulation is in the books. And the Titans, with our mock draft simulation, end up with Cam Ward, an edge rusher out of LSU, the receiver Kyle Williams out of Washington State, and Harold Fannin, the tight end out of Bowling Green. And there's one thing in particular that you leave day two, if that's the case, without, that I want. And we'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman and Company on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. That's 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in. Hey, Vandy Baseball today. Tune in right here, 1025 The Game for Vandy Baseball as they take on Georgia at Hawkins Field. Pregame at 5:45. First pitch is at 6. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at theGameNashville.com. And tune into the Sounds on 94.9 The Fan tonight as they take on Charlotte. Pregame at 5:49 and the first pitch at 6:04. Coverage also available on the Game Nashville app and at our website. Sounds Baseball on 94.9 The Fan, presented by Twin Peaks and by Family Leisure.
Here's what's going to happen at 35. You're going to get a bunch of calls in the overnight from people that want to get to that spot. And they're going to offer you things to get there. And someone who's down like in the 50s. One of those guys with 2 picks, I'll just be arbitrary here and get someone that's got low ones that want it with Buffalo. Buffalo has, they have 62, and they have the other one is 56. What if they gave you those 2 and you were able to move down? They're going to want to go up. Someone who wants a quarterback, not Buffalo, is going to want to come up there. If you've already taken Cam Ward, they're going to come and say, you're not taking Jackson Dart, and he's on the board, and we want to take him. And you'll make a tentative deal based on if Cleveland and the Giants don't draft him or trade out themselves. So I think you'd like to move down if you got your quarterback done and get 2 picks in the second round for 35.
There you go. That was Pat Kerwin on Sirius XM NFL Radio. By the way, I will say this. Robbie Stanley's texted me about, who cares if he runs a 4.55? I'm just saying, Tetero and McMillan might fall down out of the first round. And I care. I care if you run a 4.55. Bill Polian cares. I used to think that the 40 times didn't matter. I used to think that, those guys, when they run at the combine, those guys are just running in their underwear anyways. It's not the same as running with pads on. It's not the same as. And then I started working with Floyd. And I realized, he laughed at me and talked about how important the 40 time was. And again, I was like a lot of you all. I was like, who cares how fast you're running a shortened T-shirt? And then all of a sudden, the Titans drafted Corey Davis, who didn't run a 40 time because he was injured. And I asked John Robinson at the time, I said, how do you know how fast Corey Davis is? And he said, well, we can watch the tape, and the tape tells us how fast he is. And I'm like, And we all watched Corey Davis play football here. Wouldn't you agree with me? Not very fast. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Let's go to Jared, who's going to kick us off here on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. Jared, thank you for calling and waiting. You go ahead.
With it being a Friday Fireball Hot Take, this may be a hot take, but just kind of hear out the logic. So say that we're sitting at 35 and nobody calls, hypothetically, or even if they do call, okay? You mentioned Floyd earlier, like a couple seconds ago, talking about how he kind of changed your mind. There's a guy I really like by the running back, Quinshawn Judkins, and I know there's a lot of holes to where we can go, but going back to what Floyd was saying, the best way to develop a quarterback is to run the ball and play defense. And say that the top 4 or 5 receivers are off the board, the top 5 edge rushers are off the board. Do you look at running back? Do you value running back either at 35 or at 42 if you traded down with the Jets to help out your offense? Because I really feel like Judkins, he plays a lot of skins on the wall all through college. He's a dynamic back, both in the run game and the pass game. We missed out on Brock Bowers last year. Could this be another safety valve for him? Again, I might get laughed off the air, but is that something that could be in consideration when you're talking about adding, top tier talent? Because especially in the second round, Genty is going to be the only running back.
I'm going to stop you right now and just pick it up. Thank you for your call, because I think you made a good point, which is asking about the running back position. And Judkins is not the only one, because there's Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. He might go in the first round. And then there's Judkins' teammate, Trayvon Henderson, out of Ohio State. And I expect that we will see Henderson and Judkins and those guys go in the second round. I'm going to say no. And here's why I'm going to say no as far as those running backs and the Titans are concerned. Because you're already paying a running back $8 million in Tony Pollard. You've already invested, stupidly, a third-round draft choice into Tajay Spears. You're fine at running back. You don't need a top 100 pick on a running back in a draft that is loaded with running backs. There will be day 3 picks, and you've got plenty day 3 picks. There will be day 3 picks, 2 in the 4th, 1 in the 5th, 2 in the 6th. Excuse me. I want to say you have 2 or 3 in the 7th. Excuse me, 2 or 3 in the 6th, none in the 7th. Take a running back then. Because the 3 positions that I feel like at the top of the second round and really towards the middle of the second round, the three positions where there are going to be players to be had are wide receiver, edge rusher, and corner. And right now, given the L'Jarius Sneed situation, I don't see how you could in any way think that edge rusher isn't an important position and corner as well being an important position. So at the beginning of the second round, there's going to be just this list of corners. And I don't know who's going to make it into the first round and who's going to be available on day two. But Trey Amos out of Ole Miss, Maxwell Hairston out of UK, Benjamin Morrison out of Notre Dame, Darian Porter out of Iowa State. I mean, there's going to be all these different corners. Siobhan Revelle out of ECU. There's going to be all these corners that are available. There's going to be all the edge rushers that are going to be available, whether it's Landon Jackson or Jack Sawyer or Nick Scorton out of Texas A&M. There's JTT out of Ohio State, Braden Swinson out of LSU, and then the wide receivers, Jalen Royals, Jaden Higgins, Elick Aomanor out of Stanford seems like a second-round receiver. There's going to be a receiver. There's going to be a corner. There's going to be an edge rusher that is there in the second round, in either the top of the second round, the middle of the second round. I don't want to sit there and just say, no on running back. Whoa, because you did draft Derrick Henry in the second round. And I think the reason you were able to get Derrick Henry in the second round is because a lot of people were thinking, he's a running back and he's kind of a one-trick pony and he's going to the Hall of Fame. So I don't want to shoot Judkins down. Judkins is a very, very good player. Very good player. But again, I think there are running backs in this class to be had on day 3. I think there are running backs you can get on day 3 that could probably start for you this upcoming season. That's how deep the running back class is. Now, if you trade back and let's say you do a deal with Buffalo and you get their 2 second-round picks and you end up getting an edge rusher, you end up getting a receiver, you end up getting a corner, and then you've got Judkins and he's ranked as the 40th best player and you're sitting there in the 60s, I would still trade back again and see if I can, again, fix holes at more premium positions. You cannot use picks on freaking guards and running backs and expect to build a team that, as The Athletic pointed out this morning, is the worst roster, has currently the worst roster in the NFL. 615-737-1025. More of your phones to get to at 615-737-1025. Plus, we do have some info on when we will hear next from the Titans. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 1025-1063 The Game. And let me tell all the fine folks out there that it is time for the 4th annual 615 Open Charity Golf Tournament, and Cromwell Media, along with partners Fox 17, Outfront Media, and Social Indoor, are proud to announce that we'll be back at the Hermitage Golf Course on Thursday, May 29th, to make a difference while having a great time. You can join us and a few guest media members, athletes, and musicians as we raise money for Folds of Honor. Donations will go to provide life-changing scholarships to families of America's fallen or disabled military and first responders. Sign up to play or sponsor at 615open.com.
I don't know Chad Brinker that well, and just how you mentioned the relationship, all three of you working together, and just how, him being added to the front office, and how the vision of Tennessee can all be symbiotic of what you see it the same way.
I think it's really an interesting setup. I think what you're seeing is you're going to see more of that setup, I think, around the league as people, because the organizations have gotten so big. The responsibilities of the GM are spread so thin that having someone like Chad to run the football operations, and he talks regularly with Amy, just like I do, but he talks the business side, and he talks ops, and he talks all the operational stuff that goes on. He handles a lot of that. And I didn't see it as clear until they're in the middle of their draft meetings, where they're in there for 15 hours a day all through February leading up to the combine. And Chad gets pulled out an hour here, an hour there. And he's kind of in and out of those meetings where that used to be the GM. And the GM's getting pulled out. And now the GM, Mike, can sit in there and he can worry about the players in the roster. And Chad can handle all the periphery stuff. And then when we all need to get together, we get together. But I see a ton of value in it, and it's actually, I think it's really good for us. So everyone's got their roles, and we all do them, and then we convene when we need to convene, and we have a really good relationship. So I think you see Jacksonville's got a similar setup, with the Bears do too. I think there's just so much that you have to handle nowadays that having a little more defined roles on who handles what, I think, is helpful.
There you go. That was Brian Callahan on Sirius XM NFL Radio talking about the triumvirate. Him, Chad Brinker, Mike Borgonzi. You're going to see other teams do this because the Titans have been so successful with it. Last year at the end of the year press conference, Brian Callahan said, hey, every day it was me, Chad, and Rand. But I guess Chad didn't bear any of the blame. So on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Central Time, the Titans will have their pre-draft press conference. I got to tell you, I was starting to wonder if the Titans were going to have a pre-draft press conference or not. I mean, they kicked out Robbie Bourne, their PR director, so maybe the Titans just felt like we don't have to answer any questions. Every other team's doing their pre-draft press conferences this week, so I figured, hey, maybe the Titans just aren't going to do it. But at 1 o'clock on Tuesday, the Titans will have their pre-draft press conference, and I wondered, who will be doing the pre-draft press conference? Last year, I thought it was very odd that Chad Brinker got up there and kind of gave a lecture introducing Brian Callahan and Rand Carthon to take questions. And now this year, or 2 years ago, it was just Rand and no Mike Vrabel. It will be, according to the release the Titans put out, it will be Mike Borgonzi, Brian Callahan, and Chad Brinker. Now, here's my question for everybody out there when it comes to these three guys answering questions at a pre-draft press conference. Number one, does anybody really have any questions for Callahan? Like, does anybody really think Callahan's a big part of this? When it comes to Cam Ward or anything else, they're going to ask him, developmental questions for the quarterback. But do we even know if Brian Callahan can develop the quarterback? And then my second question is, if you were to ask the Titans brass questions, just you, and I'm sure you've got them, would you ask your questions to Borgonzi or would you ask them to Brinker? I would ask them to Brinker. Because if anybody's ever worked in sales before, you know how hard it is to get to the decision maker. Sometimes you've got to meet with the assistant director, and then you've got to meet with the director, and then you've got to meet with, and finally after 3 meetings, it's, well, we've got to talk to our boss to make the decision. And it's a lot easier when you just talk to the person who makes the decisions. That's Brinker. I do wonder when it comes to the Titans and these press conferences and everything else. I'm not worried about the national media that sits up there and says, Mike Borgonzi making his first pick, because they see the title general manager and they don't know the score of what's going on around here and they don't know any of that. So I do wonder locally, do the people that cover this team locally care about what Mike Borgonzi thinks? Should they care about what Mike Borgonzi thinks? Or should all the questions on Tuesday be for Chad Brinker? And I can't answer that. By the way, as a season ticket holder, my dad texted me like a couple weeks ago and goes, apparently I got invited to a luncheon with Chad Brinker and Mike Borgonzi. Apparently he told the ticket rep he wasn't going to go, but the ticket rep said, oh, maybe your son will want to go. I said, yeah, I think I'll pass. I think if I've got to talk to those guys, I think I've got something to say. I think I can get there myself. 615-737-1025. But I would ask those fans, if you're going to the luncheon, who would you rather ask questions of, Brinker or Borgonzi? 615-737-1025. So a bunch of people have asked this question about the 40 time. Again, all I said is somebody is going to fall out of the first round because it happens every year where every mock draft has some guy going and then they do not go on that Thursday night and he's Mel's number one available by a long shot and he does not go and everybody starts talking and that will happen. There will be a guy, I don't know who, and I mentioned like 9 guys, and I brought up Tedoroa McMillan, the wide receiver out of Arizona, saying maybe it could be him because he ran a 4.55 or a 4.57 at his pro day or whatever. And a lot of people have asked about the 40 time. Mo says, what does the 40 time matter if you put out good film? Somebody else said, I know you're a speed guy, but because Cam and Xavier Restrepo had a bond on and off the field, would you be okay with the Titans taking Restrepo late if he was available in the 4th round, for example? So I'm going to answer this when it comes to speed and 40 times with one very important facet, which is your tape, for the most part, is not against NFL caliber competition. And I don't care if you play in the SEC or the Big Ten or the Pac-2 or whatever. I don't care. Because every single week, you're not going up against NFL corners. Some weeks you get to play Mississippi State. You're not going up against NFL corners. So you can see a guy blow by a DB. Let's use Arizona and Tedoroa McMillan as the example. Arizona plays in the Big 12. Is that Texas Tech corner an NFL player? Probably not. So he may blow by him, but that guy may not even be, worth his weight in salt. The speed doesn't lie. Fast guys run fast. Slow guys don't run. McMillan didn't run at the combine, and he ran, anywhere from a 4.55 to a 4.7 or a 4.57 to a 4.6. Like, he's slow, and that matters. One texter, George in Murfreesboro, says Brinker and company need to be asked if they feel comfortable risking their careers on the player they plan on taking at number 1. That is not a bad question. One texter says Jacksonville and Chicago have similar setups. Fantastic. That's exactly the people I want to emulate. I want to be more like the Jags and more like Chicago. And so the Titans have pumped that line for 2 years now that the general manager job is just too big. I think that's a Burke Nihill thing. I could be wrong. I don't know. The general manager job is just too big for one person. But it's not too big for Howie Roseman in Philadelphia. Have you noticed that? So it's too big for your general managers, but not for the guys that are good. And I actually asked Chad Brinker, I said, why do you guys keep saying that in that on the record, no cameras, no recording devices press conference? I asked Chad Brinker, I said, why do you guys keep saying that the general manager job is too big for one person when you're the worst team in the league? Everybody else just has a general manager. You guys stink. And so and Brinker was like, I don't have an answer to that. So I think that line's bullcrap. But again, Brian Callahan's just being a good boy there. He's just doing, again, that's the party line. And he's saying what he has been told to say. So I can't get mad at Callahan on that, but it is foolish. We want to be like Jacksonville. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on the program. I did make a guarantee this morning on the Robbie and Rex Road program. We'll get to that next, and then we're right back to your phone. Stillman and Company, 615-737-1025. Speaking of the draft, do not miss Draft Night in Nashville. That's right, our draft show. It is a hit every year, although I do not think that there will be some freak out next Thursday simply because we know who the Titans are going to pick. But we'll be broadcasting live from Twin Peaks in Madison on Thursday, and on Friday we'll be live from Boom Boss Pizza and Watch Bar in East Nashville. Coverage begins at 6 o'clock each day, presented by Hardee's, Parman Tractor and Equipment, Twin Peaks, Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical, Shane Company, and Professional Home Improvements. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063. The Game, streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. And I was on Robbie and Retro this morning, as I always am at 7 a.m. on a Friday, and they asked me on the program today about Andrew Burnett, and they asked me, is he going to stay as the coach? And in 1 hour, the Predators will begin their postseason interviews. So they will sit down with the media as they, quote unquote, clean out their lockers, but they will have their end of the season interview sessions. And as they have those end of the season interview sessions, they'll be asked questions about what went wrong this year. And so I was on Robbie and Retro today, and I didn't know in what, vicinity they wanted to go. Like, did they want to talk about the draft? What exactly did they want to talk about? What exactly did they want to get into? And they asked me about Andrew Burnett. And I had Ian pull up the guarantee list. Reed, I know you have access to the guarantee list. And at 7 o'clock this morning, I guaranteed that Andrew Burnett will return as head coach of the Nashville Predators. Now, Andrew Burnett will meet with the media at 5 o'clock today. And I did consider running that live. I've decided against it. I don't think there's probably enough in there that people want to hear. And if there is, we'll pass it along to you. But the real question with Andrew Burnett is not about what are you going to do this offseason. It's not what happened this past season. It's not any of that. The question is whether or not he's going to keep his job. And he's not the one who's making that decision one way or another. Now, if you follow the Predators on a daily basis, if you listen to the weekly interviews that we did throughout the course of this godforsaken season, you know Barry Trotz has very much been in Andrew Burnett's corner from basically the second week of the year. They started off 0-5, and it immediately became a weekly discussion about the coach. And Barry Trotz has made it clear he believes in the coach and believes he's part of the solution and not part of the problem. Now, Barry Trotz left himself an out when it came to moving on from Burnett, when he was on the show on Wednesday, and I asked him point blank, are you committing to Andrew Burnett for next season? He said, well, we got to do the interviews. We got to talk to the players. We have to talk to all the other coaches. We have to talk to everybody. And then I'll make a determination. Barry Trotz will have a press conference next week. My guess is that press conference will come Wednesday at 5 o'clock, right before the NFL draft, right before the Titans take Cam Ward. And he'll say Andrew Burnett's coming back. I would be absolutely freaking floored if Andrew Burnett does not come back as coach. But let me say this. 3 years ago, in 2022, when the Predators got swept in the first round against the Colorado Avalanche, I begged them to fire John Hines and begged them to move on from David Boyle. And people kept telling me they're not going to do it. And I kept saying, why not? He's an awful coach. And they said they're not going to do it because they think he's a good coach. They're not going to move on from Boyle. You can bitch all you want, Jared, but they're not going to do it. And I said, and I've been very cognizant over the years that when I know the Titans aren't going to do something, or I know the Predators aren't going to do something, even if it's something they should do, I can acknowledge they're not going to do it, but I still need to talk about how important it is. I do not think Andrew Burnett should return as coach. I think this team needs a major change. Clearly, throughout the course of the season, he could not get through to the players. For whatever reason that is, if all of these players are just freaking boneheads, Marchessault and Stamkos and Brady Shea, and that it infected the locker room, well, I'm sorry. There's nothing you can do about that, and you're all going to get fired anyways, and then we just have to live out the next 5 years of our lives until the team can be good again. We have to hope that that's not the case. But Andrew Burnett had an entire season to be able to get through to these guys. And he couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. And if I had told you in October that we'd be sitting here in April, a week before day 2 of the NFL draft, and I'd be guaranteeing to all of you that the Predators would be bringing their coach back and that they would have had the 3rd worst record in the entire NHL, you would have laughed me out of the building. So at some point, don't you have to change something? And Barry Trotz said on the show on Wednesday that you can change mindset, and that sounds good. But again, I think I need something a little bit more tangible. And today, it was a minor move, but that Andreas England or whatever, that defenseman they picked up at the end of the year when everybody stopped watching the games, they re-signed him to a $775,000 contract. And I said, why? This guy sucks. And so it's starting to kind of pile up on moves where I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know if I like what I'm seeing. But I'm going to tell you, I don't think you'll hear any players come out today and say that they don't like to coach, because I think that they keep that stuff behind closed doors if that in fact is the case. And I absolutely think that on Wednesday of next week, Barry Trotz will have a press conference and he'll say Andrew Burnett returns as coach. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't change the coach. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number here on the program. 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in here on the program. One texter says, Burnett has got to, on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHunter.com, Burnett got through to the players last year. Why couldn't he do it this year? I don't know. I couldn't tell you. You know, is it a leadership in the room? Again, I know Jonathan Marchessault can be a really good player. He was the Conn Smythe winner for a cup champion. But he could not get through to the players this year. And somebody said to me, when the Maple Leafs were in town, you know, all the Canadian people are always, you know, in the building one way or another. And somebody that I'd say knows the game pretty well, when I asked, do you think the Predators should fire the coach? Said to me, and this was just a conversation we were having, said, got to do something. Can't just leave it the way it is, because either the players aren't getting it or the coach isn't giving it. And if one of those ends is disconnected, you have to figure out which one, and you got to make a change. And I do believe that the Predators are going to say, no, it was just an adjustment period, and now we're going to figure it out and make some additions in the middle of the roster and run it back next year. And that's just not something that I believe is the right choice. But I will say this, if Barry Trotz thinks it's the right choice and he's willing to risk his career on it, go ahead. But I wouldn't do it. 615-737-1025. 1 week from today, the Titans will be on the clock after the Browns and the Giants at pick number 35. And we've been talking about trades all day today. Corey Curtis, News 2, joins us next on the program. We'll weigh in on that with him. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Let's give something away right now. Be caller 5 at 615-737-1025, and you'll score a pair of 2-day passes to the Pilgrimage Music and Cultural Festival at the Park at Harlansdale in Franklin, Saturday, September 27th and Sunday, September 28th. This year's lineup features Kings of Leon, John Mayer, Grace Potter, Colony House, and more. 1 week from today, the Titans will be preparing for the 35th pick in the draft. We know who's going to be pick number 1. In fact, I felt a little left out when they were talking yesterday on all the shows across the country about 1 week from today, the NFL draft, simply because, well, there's no real question as what the Titans are going to do. They're going to draft Cam Ward. But day 2 could get very interesting. Corey Curtis, News 2, joins us now on the program. So, Corey, let's start there. Let's forget about Thursday. We know they're going to draft Cam Ward. Let's move to Friday of next week. Titans are on the clock. Pick number 35. Are you expecting a trade down? Are you expecting one of these guys that we see in the first round of every mock draft to fall to the Titans at 35? What are your expectations when it comes to the 35th overall pick in the draft?
I think if it's at all possible for them to trade, that is absolutely what they have to do, because we've talked about the high-end value of this draft versus like the starter quality in this draft, and that there's more starter quality down the line. And I think this team absolutely could benefit from that extra pick or two. So I think if there's any way at all possible, Mike Borgonzi has to be thinking trade out of 35, if at all possible.
Okay, I noticed you said Mike Borgonzi there. I actually find that fascinating because on Tuesday, they will have a press conference, Brinker, Borgonzi, and Callahan.
Yeah.
And I did wonder when they announced who all was going to be speaking there, I said, who is the local media going to ask questions of, Borgonzi or Brinker? And the reason I ask you this question, you're in the local media, you know the score here, you know Chad Brinker's in charge, and yet you just said right there, Mike Borgonzi trading the pick. Why?
Because he's the general manager, and that's his
but
job.
He's not in charge, is he?
Well, okay, well then bring Amy Adams-Strunk, because she's in charge.
I mean, she will be there.
No, I know, but she's not making the pick. Okay, it's just like Chad Brinker, he may have input. Maybe he's the one calling the shot. I believe he hired Mike Borgonzi to do a job. I could be proven wrong and foolish. It wouldn't be the first time. I think ultimately that is his ship to steer on cultivating that scenario. Like I said, this is new ground for us, and we'll have to wait and see. But I believe that's who's steering the ship. We'll see. Okay,
so let's say Cam Ward is a total bust. Who do you lay that at the feet of, Brinker or Borgonzi?
It's both of them. Look, it's the whole scouting administration if they whiff on this one. Because what have we heard? That it's a big conversation amongst all of them. Reggie McKenzie, the guy they got from the Raiders. I mean, if all of them have come to this conclusion and they're all wrong, then they all get blamed for it.
Okay, now I would say that makes sense, but last year they told us the same thing, that they were all in it together, and then Rand Carthon got fired. Chad Brinker's now the president of football operations, which he was last year, but he now has the final say title, and he got promoted after that crap year last year. So Corey, I got to tell you, I feel like, again, I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong, because who knows what's inside Amy's head, and what's inside Amy's head changes every 5 minutes. But
nope,
I feel like you're circling Borgonzi a little bit too much here.
Maybe I am. I just know that if I was Chad Brinker and I was in his position of basically running a football organization, and I was hiring a player, personnel person, this was his job to pick the groceries, buy the groceries for the football team, then that's his job. I may have input. I may say, "Are you sure?" But that's his job. Okay. Just like I have been hired to do the sports at 6 and 10, occasionally we will have conversations about content, but it's my ship to drive every day at 6 and 10. I have a news director who sits above me, and he does not call the shots on my show every day.
Right. But what if they hired somebody that was the president of sports at News 2, and they decided what was on at 6 and 10 every day.
Well, if I had
What
a
would-
producer, who was in charge of content at 6 p.m., that would be one thing. But if, as in my position that I have been hired to do, it's to put that show together every day. And that's the way I view the general manager position for any football team, not just the Tennessee Titans.
Sure. Corey Curtis, News 2 is our guest. Who are as much as you say they have to trade down at 35, who are the guys if they slide out of the first round that if they're there at 35, you say, screw it, you'll take them? And let's leave, the top 10 consensus guys. So Ashton Genty, Tyler Warren, Mason Graham, those guys, they're gone. Forget about them. But who is somebody that you see in all the first rounds of the mock draft you would love the Titans to have? If they're there at 35, you'd say, you know what, screw it, take them.
If they have a trade option, a viable trade option, I don't know if any of those guys that could slide there would be viable enough for me to pass up on more picks. We've talked about Ibuka, and does anybody really think he's going to be there?
I don't, but again, isn't there every year there's a guy we see mocked in every first round mock that's there available in day 2? And we always wonder, is there an injury with this guy? Did they find out that he was part of a gang? Like, what did we find out here?
So I guess I would say Ibuka. And I'm not even going to try to say the defensive end from Boston College's name.
Ezaraku.
There you go. Very productive player. Fills a very big void for this football team. If he's there, I think he becomes, extremely, compelling for this football team. I know a lot of people really like Luther Burden, and there's a lot to like. The 600 yards last season scares me. I mean, I just, how does he go from 1,200 to 600? I don't understand that. And, someone smarter than me can probably tell me, but I'm just more enamored with more picks. But, those would be two guys that I would probably have a hard time stepping away from.
A lot of us, Corey Curtis, News 2 is the guest here on the program. A lot of us seem to have accepted that Cam Ward is going to be the number 1 overall pick. Have you seen enough or heard enough about Cam Ward or from Cam Ward to say, okay, that's a good pick to pick him number 1 overall? Or are you still skeptical of that decision, even though it seems apparently obvious the Titans are going to do it?
Look, just about any quarterback you take in the first round, there's some cross your fingers, grit your teeth to that pick. There's no such thing as a sure thing, just about. I mean, Andrew Luck is about the only thing we've had that's been a sure thing at that position in a while. So there's nothing that's 100% about it. I've seen enough, I've heard enough to feel good about it. I mean, I like the young man. I like what he's made of. I like where he comes from. I like his priorities. I think these are all things that I like about him. I like his trajectory as a collegiate player, his ability to adapt to new coaches, new teammates, new systems, his ability to step into new situations and immediately become a leader. There's a lot I like there about him. And and I know it's very difficult to go where you're going without a quarterback. And so if it's not going to be him, what's your plan? What's your plan? Because, Brandon Allen and Will Levis and Tim Boyle are not a great plan, at this point. And, we talked about the guys that were out there, Sam Darnold, among the others that would have been viable options. They obviously weren't that interested in that. So, to me, it's got to be him, and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope he's what you think he is. And, again, the person I like as much as the player, and that means a lot to me.
Okay, so with that being said, let's say Amy Adams Strunk rolls over on the side of the bed, and we know, again, when it comes to her and decision-making, that does feel like who knows what day. Amy Adams Strunk rolls over on the side of the bed, calls you at News 2 while you're getting ready to do the 6 o'clock sportscast and says, Corey, I heard you on the Stillman show. I think you're what we need to run this organization. So I'm firing Chad and I'm hiring you. Corey Curtis, News 2 sports director, is now going to be the president, czar, the authoritarian, the tyrant of the Tennessee Titans. It's your team. Are you still taking Cam Ward number 1 overall?
I'm asking all my guys, tell me one reason I shouldn't draft him. And if I don't get anything compelling, I am drafting him.
What if one of the guys in the room goes, I don't think he's that good?
I would say why.
Well, I mean, I think it's
convinced me. Everything he's shown is good.
But he has no like elite measurables, right? Like he's not 6'5". Okay. He's not an elite athlete like Kyler Murray or Anthony Richardson or those kind of guys.
Are we really going to do this at the quarterback position? Tom Brady, who had one of the worst combines.
But Tom Brady is 6'5". Like,
okay, so he's 6'5".
You see what I'm saying? Like, what is? I believe Mahomes is 6'2".
Okay, 6'2". Okay, how tall is Dan Fouts?
I have no idea how tall Dan Fouts is. Dan Fouts played before I was born.
But again, at that position, guys can play or they can't play. Russell Wilson's 5'11". Drew Brees is 5'11", 6 foot. Okay, believe me, I used to get hung up on height and stuff all the time. But I've seen the Zach Mettenbergers. I've seen the 6'5" guys out there with the big arm who can sling it. There's been a million of those guys.
Right, being tall is not the only elite thing that you have. But when it comes to Cam Ward, there is nothing about Cam Ward that is elite.
That is not true. You know what?
Other than his ability to throw off platform.
Okay, who has the most touchdown passes in college football history?
I'm gonna guess it was Cam Ward because he played the half of that bowl game.
That's exactly who it is. That to me is a pretty elite stat.
The most touchdown passes?
The most touchdown passes. Who was the number 1 offense in college football last year?
I have no idea, but they couldn't beat Syracuse or Georgia Tech.
It was the Miami Hurricanes.
Okay.
So he led the number 1 offense in college football in his only year there. He's the number 1 all-time touchdown passer in college football history. Those are elite numbers. Those are elite numbers.
Right.
Okay,
so
I don't care if he's 6'2" or 6'3". Those are elite numbers.
But we're talking about the number 1 pick here.
Yeah, we are.
If you take him number 1, you're passing on all the quarterbacks next year too. You just got hired.
Yeah. Okay. Who knows where I'm picking next year?
Well, if you don't take Cam Ward and you don't have a quarterback, I have a pretty good idea of where you're picking next year.
Yeah, so you're tanking. So you're saying we're going to tank for next year.
I mean, again, you just got hired, so it's not your fault that you didn't go get Sam Darnold.
Okay, you think that the owner cares about that? I go 3-14 next year. I'm probably one and done. I
guess I would argue that if they go 3-14 this next year, they'll find a way to keep their jobs. Like Brinker will still be here if that's what happened.
Maybe.
I mean, I'm telling you right now, if Amy hired me today and said, Jared, you're in, I would say to her and to the fans, we are not taking Cam Ward. We will figure something out at quarterback. We're not going to like it. It's going to be tough.
Are you picking there or are you trading?
Oh, I'm trading. Definitely.
Okay, but what if there's no trade? What if there's no trade to be had?
Give me if the clock's running and nobody's calling,
yeah,
then I draft Travis Hunter.
Okay, you draft the best player in the draft.
He's the best player in the draft. The other best player's hurt. I'm taking Travis Hunter.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, if you're on that pick and you're not taking quarterback, you take the best player, and that makes sense. But I think if you're not taking Cam Ward, then what makes the most sense is trading out of it.
I guess my bigger beef when it comes to Cam Ward and those stats is just, we've seen Graham Harrell put up massive stats in college. We've seen Hendon Hooker put up massive stats in college. We've seen, and so Jackson Dart had massive stats in college, and I'm not in love with him. I'm trying to these guys do not profile as elite quarterbacks, and that's what bothers me.
Jackson Dart didn't lead the number 1 offense in college football. And Jackson Dart isn't the all-time leading touchdown passer in college football.
Jackson Dart played much better competition this past season than Cam Ward did.
And you know what?
And he led the conference in passing yards.
I watched Jackson Dart, and I would not draft him.
I'm just saying, Jackson Dart beat Georgia. Cam Ward couldn't beat Georgia Tech.
That's great. That's great.
You don't think Georgia's defense very good?
No, I just, he beat Georgia. Great. I think Vanderbilt, didn't they beat Georgia a couple of years ago?
Did Vandy beat Georgia a couple of years ago?
I can't remember.
I do not think they did.
Okay.
They beat Kirby his first year, which was like 10 years ago, which should
That's
make you
right.
feel old as
And,
hell, which makes me feel
I
old
am
as hell,
old.
too.
I'm
Well, it makes me
54
feel
now.
old as hell.
I-
Corey Curtis, News 2, as always on
Okay.
our program. 615. Oh, I didn't ask you about Fireball Hot Take Friday. Holy crap. Fireball Hot Take Friday. What's your hot
Okay.
take this week?
Okay, there are two players in the draft, and you brought up both of them that have been talked about, but I don't think they've been talked about like they would have been in years past. Like last year, we got Brock Bowers to death, and he was fantastic this year. I think Tyler Warren is absolutely on Brock Bowers' level, and I think he is going to be a sensational NFL player for whoever takes him. And so I think he has been really underhyped in this draft process, and I think Ashton Genty's a star.
I think Vrabel should take Ashton Genty. I don't think he will, but I think he should. Corey Curtis, News 2 on the program, as always. 615-737-1025. I have to get on Corey's Cam Ward take. I have to get on his Cam Ward take. We'll do that next. Stillman and Company, 1025, 106 The Game.
having been in that position a couple of times, I can tell you that it keeps the GM up very late at night and get up very early in the morning. There are a lot of, go to bed at 2 or go to fall asleep at 2 and get up at 5 nights debating that. And the debate, you framed the debate correctly. You got a sure shot player, or as close to a sure shot in the draft as you can find, sitting up there, players in some cases sitting up there, and you got a quarterback who, no matter whether you like him or don't like him, doesn't deserve to be drafted that high. In fact, I would argue that both quarterbacks, Ward and Shador Sanders, that all the gurus are talking about, neither one deserves to be drafted that high. Ward is closer to what you think ought to be a top 10 choice than Shador is. But we know that quarterbacks get pushed up in the draft simply because of the need and because people want to swing and hope that they hit a home run.
That was Bill Polian on Sirius XM NFL Radio. And so Corey Curtis, I said, hey, if Amy wakes up and decides to fire Chad Brinker tomorrow, which for anybody else would be unheard of, for Amy, that would actually be more par for the course, and puts you in charge of you drafting Cam Ward. And Corey said, well, I would need to look at my guys and I would need to say, okay, you guys tell me why I shouldn't. And I'm like, well, he does not have the first round, the top of the first round, your elite quarterback measurables. He does not have those. The size, the hand size, he does not have those. Peyton Manning had them. John Elway had them. And I know there are exceptions to every rule. But again, it's funny because we were talking about 40 time earlier today, and Robbie was like, who cares if he's 4.55? And I said, Bill Parcells used to always say, if you draft for exception, pretty soon your entire team will be full of exceptions, and then you will lose. So when it comes to Ward, I don't have a problem if the Titans sit there and say, hey, we're wowed by this kid, and we've got a plan. We're going to work on his mechanics and his footwork so that the fundamentals are locked in place, but he's got the it. We are sold on him. We love him, and he can do it. But again, I would not take him number 1 overall, and I would not take him because he does not have enough what they call blue traits. And that matters to me. The blue traits. Let me tell you what does not matter to me. Corey's argument that, well, he threw for the most touchdown passes in college. I do not care about that. Again, Graham Harrell threw for a bunch of touchdown passes in college. Reed sent me a list here. It's Cam Ward, Case Keenum, Dylan Gabriel, Kellen Moore, and Graham Harrell. Again, that doesn't affect me one way or another. Just because you threw for a bunch of yards or you threw for a bunch of touchdowns or you threw for a bunch of – Jackson Dart threw for a bunch of yards at Ole Miss. I wouldn't take him number 1 overall either. And then what did Corey say as soon as I brought that up? He's like, well, I watched Jackson Dart. Again, that's what a lot of people seem to go to this when it comes to wanting a player that's not justified by the numbers. And what they then do is they say, well, watch tape. Okay, I've watched Cam Ward tape. I like Cam Ward. He's got some game. And I take him in the first round. And I'd certainly take him before freaking Shador Sanders or Jackson Dart or those guys. But if you take Cam Ward, here's the other thing nobody ever seems to talk about. If you take Cam Ward number 1 overall, which they're going to, if you take Cam Ward at number 1, what you're going to do is you're passing on next year's quarterback class. And you're probably passing on the quarterback class after that. I'm old enough to remember when the Titans passed on Patrick Mahomes because they had Marcus Mariota. So just be very careful when it comes to that. One texter says, Corey did the exact same thing fans do when they want to hope that a quarterback is good, then believe that their quarterback is good. They rely on these random stats. Case Keenum threw the most passes, the most touchdown passes all time. And I would not argue that Case Keenum is the best college quarterback. Again, like Dylan Gabriel's right there with him. I'm not drafting Dylan Gabriel. And Dylan Gabriel's short. And that's a big reason why I'm not drafting him. One of many. 615-737-1025, which is our phone number here on the program. That's 615-737-1025 if you want to weigh in. There is an interesting, very interesting Titans transaction that is at least worth discussing here that I want to get to, as well as something in the Athletic. We'll do all that next. 615-737-1025 at Stillman and Company on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. And let me just tell all the fine folks out there, how would you like to see Keith Urban at Bridgestone Arena VIP style? Texting the keyword Keith to 615-737-1025 and receive a link to sign up for a chance to win all-inclusive tickets to the Eurostone Club at Bridgestone Arena so you can see Keith Urban. Plus, also, you'll have your chance to win $1,000 cash. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Still in a company on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. So the Titans every day at 3 o'clock, the NFL, which is 4 Eastern, obviously, the NFL transactions get posted for the day. And so the Titans send out an email saying, hey, these are the transactions for the day. Today, we've signed Johnny Joseph to the practice squad. We've released Stevie Johnson because he's now, whatever. And we've signed so-and-so from the practice squad to the active roster. Every day they do stuff like that. And you don't get those as many during the offseason because they're not making transactions as consistently. But again, you still probably get 2 or 3 transactional emails a week. And so the Titans just fired off an email at 3 o'clock today about the latest transactions. And I was just surprised because I saw that Justin Hardy, the special teams savant, whom they signed last year in the middle of the year when they couldn't stop a nosebleed on a punt return, has had his contract terminated for non-football injury. Now, according to Spot Track, Justin Hardy was due to make the league minimum $1.2 million for a veteran player. I guess I'm a little surprised. I would like to know what exactly it was that Justin Hardy had, the NFI, the non-football injury. But I saw that and that kind of raised an eyebrow. I'm like, hey, wasn't this the guy that came in and, for all intents and purposes, saved their special teams last year? What happened there? And if they're going to, this would have to be like a torn Achilles or a torn ACL or a torn something that he'd be out for the year, or else they probably would have kept him to try to rehab him back up. But I just find it fascinating. Again, not the end of the world. But this was a guy that they really held in high regard last year of, hey, we're not all stupid. We signed Justin Hardy. Yeah. And then they re-signed him. And when he re-signed, he said, this is where I wanted to be all along. I wanted to be back here. And now he's had his contract terminated with an NFI, non-football injury. Again, that either means that he was driving a car, got in a car accident, hurt, and so you can NFI him. Or he was working out on his own and tore his Achilles, tore his ACL, something like that. Again, not the end of the world, but I just found it to be a little fascinating. Phone lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, 615-737-1025. Robert in Spring Hill says, I see what you're saying, Jared, but I'd also argue that Jalen Hurts just won a Super Bowl and his measurables were not elite. Now, I don't know what Jalen Hurts' measurables were. I don't know how tall he is. I don't know whatever. Jalen Hurts wasn't the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And so the way that this works is when you're picking, this is why I had this conversation with Chase the other day, because he was talking about the all-time biggest draft bust in the history of the Titans. And every time I say this, every single person gets all up in arms. Because it's easy to say that Isaiah Wilson was the biggest draft bust in the history of the Titans. He was a first-round pick. He played 4 snaps in the NFL, and he went to the cuckoo bin right after that. Got it. But he was the 28th pick in the draft. Kevin Dodd was the 32nd pick, I believe, in the NFL draft. Technically a second-rounder because New England had forfeited their first-rounder that year. But there's not that big of a difference between 32 and 28. And again, look, John Robinson drafted both of them. But if you're going to say Isaiah Wilson was a total bust and didn't do anything, you have to bring up Kevin Dodd. But I still think Corey Davis was a bigger mistake than either two. Why? Because Corey Davis went 5th overall in a loaded draft. And so the conversation I was having with Chase was, again, the biggest draft bust. And I'm like, it's hard for me to look at Isaiah Wilson, the 28th pick in the draft, and to not say, well, hold on, wait a minute. Corey Davis was the 5th pick. And Chase goes, but they almost got a 1,000-yard season out of him. I go, exactly. They used the 5th overall pick on a guy and almost got 1,000-yard season out of him in a loaded draft. That's awful. Cole McDonald never played a snap for the Titans. Luke Falk was taken pick number 199. Never played a meaningful snap for the Tennessee Titans. But we don't consider them the greatest draft bust because those are day 3 picks. I guess the point I'm making here is, man, value is important. And so when it comes to Cam Ward, Cam is not your traditional 1-1 quarterback. You are drafting an exception at number 1 overall. They've decided this is what they're going to do. They're going to draft for exception. Did you notice before Abdul Carter got hurt, I was all about Abdul Carter, and I think they might have been too. But I was like, take Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter, he's a pass rusher. He's legit. But then when it came out that he was hurt and he couldn't get back for his pro day and he didn't work out at the combine, I said, no, thank you. Because again, if I'm taking first overall, I need a sure thing. I need something that I can really hang my hat on. And if you draft exceptions, your team will be full of exceptions, which is exactly what got you in this mess in the first place. The Titans kept taking risks. Well, we drafted Jeffrey Simmons, who had a torn ACL, and that worked out for us. But so we'll take Caleb Farley, who just had back surgery last week. Okay. So I'm fine with saying, hey, we believe in Cam Ward. We think Cam Ward is special. And they're not saying it yet, but I will need them to say it either right before they draft him or right after they draft him. But not a lot of people think Cam Ward is special. I think that's the bigger issue. Jalen Hurts, the biggest passenger in the NFL. This guy is Brad Johnson more than he is an elite quarterback, but he just won the Super Bowl, so everyone's going to tell you how great he is. Yeah, call me in 5 years. Because once those players start getting old, and if they don't replenish those offensive weapons, Jalen's not going to be the same guy. Once Barkley gets old and AJ gets old and Goddard they move on from and the tackles and Lane Johnson retires, we'll see. Whereas I have a pretty good feeling Joe Burrow's going to be good in 5 years. Justin Herbert is going to be good in 5 years. 615-737-1025. That's our phone number, 615-737-1025 here on the program. Coming up next, there is one thing that, again, I'm not sure I completely believe, but I do think it's probably pretty close to the ballpark when it comes to the Titans. And it's really bad. And this is why I've wanted to make pricey veteran additions this past week. We'll get to it next. Stillman & Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063. The Game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. And of course, we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee on a Fireball Hot Take Friday. So the Athletic had a story this morning. I was waiting, and I just went to the Athletic to see what they were saying. And they had the NFL projection models. Now, I've crapped on these before in the past, so keep that in mind. The NFL projection model ranking all 32 rosters ahead of the draft. And immediately I thought, where do you think the Titans rank on this? And I'm like, they're not going to have the Titans 32 because New England right now doesn't have a left tackle. New England doesn't even have a number one receiver. New England doesn't have a running back. New England just outside of Christian Gonzalez and Drake May. And those guys look decent as rookies and second year, but they really don't have a whole lot. They got a tight end, but that's basically it. They signed a DT. Surely New England's got to be below the Titans. What about the Giants? What about the Jets that purged their entire team? So they put it up at the Athletic. It says right now everyone is chasing the Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, who unsurprisingly still have the best roster in the NFL according to our projection model. But where do all the other 32 teams rank? So I just started scrolling on my phone. I'm like, all right, let's see how far down I have to go before I get to the Titans. Number 32. All the way at the bottom. Quote, it's fitting that the team with the worst roster heading into the NFL draft is also the team with the number one pick. And while that pick is likely going to be spent on a franchise quarterback, the Titans have a lot of work to do to rebuild the roster around the presumed pick of Cam Ward. The wide receivers, offensive tackles, edge rushers, and corners all rate in the bottom 5 of the league. That's essentially the opposite of what the Eagles have built to win the Super Bowl. Now, first of all, that should scare you when they talk about offensive tackles, because your offensive tackles are your offensive tackles for at least the next 3 years. Dan Moore is going to be your starting left tackle for the next 3 years. J.C. Latham is going to be your starting right tackle. Excuse me. So that's not going to change. But I actually think, again, I think Moore's fine, and I think Latham will be decent. I think Latham will be an above-average right tackle, which is not good enough for the number 7 pick. But, again, beggars can't be choosers at this point, so I'm not too worried about that. Receivers, they have one. Everything else is a train wreck, and they have no edge rushers. And corners, I mean, they have a guy in Jarvis Brownlee who I think is probably a backup. But they have Jarvis Brownlee at one spot, and they've got L'Jarius Sneed on the other side, who has a bad knee and is facing criminal charges. Other than that, though, when he plays and he's not on the verge of going to prison, he might be a good player. Last year, by the way, he was not. But again, they say, hey, outside of Cam Ward, the receivers, tackles, edge rushers, and corners all right at the bottom of the league. And this takes me back to what I've said earlier this week. On 2 separate occasions, there have been veteran players whose teams either have just openly come out and said, we want to move on from this player, or whose team did not say, when asked if they had the opportunity to say Mark Andrews would be on the roster, the Ravens would not do that. This is why I'm saying, go pay the money for Mark Andrews, go pay the money for Jalen Ramsey. Go make a trade. Now, when I say make a trade, I'm not saying trade the 35th pick in the draft for Jalen Ramsey. I'm saying make a football trade, a draft time trade. We swap 6 spots in the 5th round and 5 spots in the 7th round, and you get Jalen Ramsey. We swap from the bottom of the 4th round to the top of the 4th round, and you get Mark Andrews. That's what I want to do. And everybody, especially our midday show, tells me I can't do it. No, Jared. We don't want Jalen Ramsey. We don't want those guys. And they say, well, he's not an elite player anymore. Again, I'm not looking for an elite corner. But you'd have to pay Jalen Ramsey $21 million. Yeah. because I'm the worst team in the league. Free agency is behind me. There's not that many starting players out there. I only have one pick in the top 100 that I can use to improve my roster because I'm using the first pick on a quarterback. So go ahead and put him there. But I still, according to this, have bad tackles, bad receivers, bad corners, bad edge rushers. Well, I can't draft an edge rusher, a receiver, and a corner all at the same time. So I have to do something. And my response is pay the money. That's my response. Go get Jalen Ramsey. Again, Miami wants to move on. They've put it out there. Jalen Ramsey didn't even request a trade. They've put it out there. They've gone on the record and said this wasn't Adam Schefter's sources report. This was Chris Greer, their general manager, holding a press conference saying, we want to move on from Jalen Ramsey. Again, Pro Football Focus said Jalen Ramsey was the 16th highest graded corner in the NFL last year out of 233. Is the 16th best player elite? No. But again, I'm not trying to get an elite player. I'm just trying to get a starting player. But Jared, you have to pay $20 million in order to do it. I know. But right now you're paying $19 million to a corner who has a bad knee, so he probably isn't going to be on the football field anyways, but is also involved in a lawsuit down in Texas, which is most likely going to get him suspended and may get him sent to jail. What would you rather have? The pain in the ass, no longer elite, but 16th best corner in the league, or the guy who might go to prison? You tell me. What would you rather have? Mark Andrews, who's been a consistent tight end in the NFL, or Chig, the guy that they've tried to put out there as a starting player the last 2 years, and they have stunk with him at tight end while doing. This is why, again, I'm trying to take on the $11 million from Mark Andrews to stick him at tight end. I'm not giving up a third-round pick for these guys. I'm not giving up a fourth-round pick. I'm trading from the top of the fourth round to the bottom of the fourth round. I still get a fourth-round player. I've already got another fourth-round pick. That's what I'm doing. But I'm paying the $11 million so you don't have to cut him. I'm paying the $11 million, Baltimore, so that Buffalo, Kansas City, Cincinnati, that they don't sign him. The Chargers don't sign him. So that you don't have to go in the playoffs and worry about that. Again, with Jalen Ramsey and the Dolphins, all of that money is guaranteed. They cannot release him. Derek was like, well, just wait till they release him and I'll pay him $5 million. Well, again, the 16th best corner in the league, I think is probably worth more than $5 million, especially on the worst team. So when you've got the worst roster in the league, you have two choices. You can either do something about it, or you can just keep trying to run backups out there to see if it's going to get you from the bottom somewhere else. But that's why this week I've said, go do Jalen Ramsey. Go do Mark Andrews. Because you need players. Again, I think we could all agree. You need good, young, in their prime players. It'd be great to have a fourth-year Jack Conklin at right tackle and to have a fourth-year Derrick Henry at running back and to have a fourth-year Kevin Byard at safety and to have a second-year Javon Curse at pass rusher and to have a fifth-year Derek Mason at wide receiver. But you can't get those players. You can get one of them, maybe at 35. And even that guy may not be in his prime yet. But you can get veterans that are solid players and will give you a solid contribution if you pay them. Mark Andrews is getting paid in Baltimore. Jalen Ramsey is getting paid in Miami. If you take those salaries on, those teams can get rid of them. And then you've got better players and you will go up the list and you will win more football games. But if you don't do that, then you're going to put Cam Ward on a team that, once again, The Athletic says has the worst roster in the league, and you are going to ask Cam Ward to win you football games with a bad roster, with no defense, with below average tackles, with one wide receiver, with no tight end, and it's not going to happen. And regardless of whether or not this is fair, if you put Cam Ward at quarterback and you get your ass kicked every single Sunday, the blame will go on him. And he will not be able to develop. And then you'll fire your coach. And then you've got to get a new coach. And then the new coach didn't draft Cam Ward, and he doesn't like Cam Ward. And now what do you see the cycle I'm talking about here? So this is why if I was running this team, I'd be having a conversation with Amy. I'd be asking for $30 million more right now, because I'm getting Jalen Ramsey to play corner and I'm getting Mark Andrews to play tight end, because I've got the worst team in the league right now. 615-737-1025. Add that to the list. 615-737-1025. Plus, there's one player that a lot of Titan fans seem to be interested in trading. I'm not that interested in trading. And yet the writing is on the wall that there might actually be a trade of this player. We'll get to that next. 615-737-1025. It's Stillman and Company on 102.5 and 106 through the game.
So what is your opinion, Jeff? What do you got?
I start off with the NFL side of it, especially playing my position. You know, in my opinion, I wish people were, you know, especially on the outside world, you know, they say, oh, he had a down year, this and that. But, you know, they don't take in consideration that, you know, I wanted to, you know, especially like this week, you know, they got the NFL coaches meeting and they all down there, the media down there. And why not just go ask some of these coaches, head coaches, what is your game plan against number 98 for the Tigers? You know, it's never single blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking at in my opinion, instead of looking at the game stat sheet, look at the game itself and how many hands is on number 98 every game.
The tape. Watch the tape, right? That's what you're saying. Watch the tape.
You know, at this point, when I you hate to say it to the media because then some people want to consider you as a butthole, but you know, it's like, you know, sometimes I do get a little frustrating and, you know, just to hear, you know, you not having a good year, what you think the problem is. I'm like, because I'm getting double teamed 95% of the game. So, you know, that's one of my opinion.
That was Jeffrey Simmons on Chill Jelnick's podcast. Honest to God, that's my favorite cut that we play when Simmons is sitting here whining about being double teamed. And he's like, you don't want to go into the media because if you go in the media and you start whining about double teams, you look like some butthole. And I love it I love play. Can we play that cut again, Ward? I mean, Reed, I'm sorry. I get Cam Ward on my mind. Can we play that cut again, Reed?
Dang,
I want to.
Am I the Cam Ward producers?
Well, shouldn't that be a good thing?
I don't think
Everybody
so.
in town thinks you're the best that ever lived. With that being said, play this. I love that butthole part where Jeffrey Simmons is like, yeah, if you go to the media, they think you're some butthole.
So what is your opinion, Jeff? What do you got?
I start off with the NFL side of it, especially playing my position. You know, in my opinion, I wish people were, you know, especially on the outside world, you know, they say, oh, he had a down year, this and that. But, you know, they don't take in consideration that, you know, I wanted to, you know, especially like this week, you know, they got the NFL coaches meeting and they all down there, the media down there. And why not just go ask some of these coaches, head coaches, what is your game plan against number 98 for the Tigers? You know, it's never single blocks.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking at in my opinion, instead of looking at the game stat sheet, look at the game itself and how many hands is on number 98 every game.
The tape. Watch the tape, right?
Well,
That's what you're saying. Watch the tape.
You know, at this point, you hate to say it to the media because then some people want to consider you as a butthole, but you know, it's like,
I love it.
You know, sometimes
That's
I do get a little
favorite.
frustrating and, you know,
I mean, again, when it comes
you know,
to Simmons, he's a sit here and whine about being double teamed. Just whine about it. And then say, you don't want to whine about it in the media because then you look like a butthole. Hey, you look like a whiny crybaby. That's what you look like. So the Athletic says the Titans have the worst roster in the league. I don't necessarily disagree with that, though. I would say I think New England probably has a worse roster than they do, but that's a different discussion. And yet, we can all agree they have massive holes. They need a receiver, a starting receiver. They need a tight end, a starting tight end. Although some of you out there seem to want to keep holding on to Chig like he doesn't suck. He stinks. They need a starting corner because, again, L'Jarius Sneed, we know about his issues. And they need an edge rusher because, well, they let Harold Landry go and Arden Key sucks. And they only have one pick to do this. And so we have to wonder, like, would there be another way that they could acquire more draft capital? The one thing I would not do is I would not trade Jeffrey Simmons. And the reason why I would not trade Jeffrey Simmons is because no matter how much of a whiny crybaby he is, he still is a good player. He's not a great player, and he's certainly not as good as he thinks he is, but he is a good player. He is the best player on the team right now. And again, when you have the worst roster in the league, you're not going to make it better by getting rid of the only good player that you have. And yet, the writing seems to be on the wall a little bit that the Titans could be entertaining a Simmons trade. As Sam Phelan at A to Z Sports wrote, he connected the dots. At the beginning of the offseason, Tennessee was not considering moving Jeffrey Simmons at all. The coaching staff view Simmons as an essential piece of their defense that will only get better if supported with the proper help up front. Even a few weeks ago, Sam Phelan writes, would have told you that a Jeffrey Simmons trade was not possible, not on anybody's radar. But reading between the lines of the Titans pre-draft process, perhaps things have changed for them internally. And what he's referring to is the top 30 visits, where you get 30 visits. You can bring 30 prospects into your building. And the Titans have brought in a handful of round 2 defensive tackles. Guys that, again, they don't have a third-round pick. Maybe they get one, but they don't have a third-round pick. But guys who are most likely to go at the top of the second round or the middle of the second round certainly would not be available in the 100s. Darius Alexander, an interior defensive lineman out of Toledo. Derek Harmon, an interior defensive lineman out of Oregon. TJ Sanders, an interior defensive lineman out of South Carolina. There was a kid out of Tennessee who was brought in on a top 30 visit. It's kind of odd, right? It's kind of odd that they'd bring in these guys that project to be second or third round picks when they don't have a third round pick. And again, they need to use that second round pick probably on a receiver, probably on an edge rusher, maybe on a corner. So the only logical thing would be that the Titans trade Simmons and then replace him with a pick. But at the same time, I wouldn't do it. I do not think Simmons is a good leader. I think he's a good player. And I think Simmons is a whiner, whining about being double teamed. Yes, because good players get double teamed. The really good players are the ones that beat the double teams. Apparently, Simmons can't do that. I don't think he's a butthole for saying that. I think he's a crybaby for saying, I get double teamed, it's not fair. But at the same time, he is, in my opinion, unquestionably the best player on the team. And I just do not believe that you get better by getting rid of your best player and picking up a second-round pick in return. And what the Titans really need, instead of getting rid of Simmons, what they really need is they need to bring in better players. And they need to bring in better leaders that push Simmons down the leaderboard so that whenever something happens, the media doesn't go in the locker room and say, oh, let's go talk to Jeffrey Simmons about it. That's what Kevin Byard was. That's what Ryan Tannehill was. That's what Derrick Henry was. But when they got rid of all those guys, the Titans just said, Simmons is the guy. And then Simmons is over there wanting to fight Buck at training camp. But again, you can win with whiners. You just can't have them be your top leaders. But what you can't win with is bad players. And Simmons is not a bad player. But I do think it's kind of odd when it comes to Simmons and it comes to the Titans and it comes to, I do think it's odd that they're bringing in all these second-round defensive linemen. What are they going to do, add another defensive tackle in the second round? Well, we have no receivers. We don't have a tight end. The left guard we drafted 11th overall a couple of years ago might suck. Our top corner may be headed to prison, but we have a third defensive tackle. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So I don't know why the Titans are doing what they're doing, but again, if you're trying to make logic of it, then I would say that it does look like they're considering getting rid of Simmons. And I just think that's a bad idea because he's the best player they have. And you don't get better by getting rid of the only good player you have. 615-737-1025. Where do your phones on all this next? At 615-737-1025. Plus, if Simmons were on the market, what would he be worth? PK has a report on that. We'll hit that as well. And then I have a bone to pick with our midday show that I want to get off my chest as well. We'll do it all next. 615-737-1025. Stillman and Company on 1025 The Game.
So Jared suggested, as we just played, that the Titans should move on from L'Jarius Sneed and take a run at Jalen Ramsey.
That is just I guess I'm going to say this the nicest way I can. Jared, that's just completely wrong. If this is still Rand Carthon, you would probably blow a gasket, Jared, if they even thought about bringing in Ramsey, especially with the $21 million and a guy that is declining. Listen, he was one of the best cover corners, if not the best cover corner for a period of time. I think it was like a 4-year period in there where we like, listen, you didn't go at him and he held his own on that island. But as I've seen with many defensive backs that have been his caliber, as you start to get to the end, your play changes and you're not the player that you once were.
That was D. Mace, and boy, he was all worked up this week about the Jalen Ramsey take. Then Mark Andrews, today I went on the midday show at the end of the show, and I figured that they were going to get all over me for saying I'd go give Mark Andrews $11 million yesterday. I said, no, I'm okay with that. I'm like, what? He's a declining player. So if you have the worst roster in the league, which the Athletic says the Titans have the worst roster in the entire NFL, if you have the worst roster in the league, and you have only one draft choice to be able to improve the worst roster in the league because Cam Ward's going to be the quarterback at number 1. So all the other things you have to fix with the 35th pick. And your top corner may be headed to prison. How do I get better? And to me, the answer is to take guys that we know are solid players in the NFL, not superstar players, because superstar players are not available, but to take solid players in the NFL and buy them. That's the answer. And yet here's the midday show, and they're telling me you can't have Jalen Ramsey because he's not an elite corner anymore. I'm not asking him to be an elite corner. Well, then I don't want to pay him $20 million. Well, should have thought of that when there were other corners to be had in free agency. But there's not. There's one guy. It's Ramsey. Mark Andrews, $11 million. Again, maybe you even have to get him a pay raise in order for him to want to play for you. Now, going from the Ravens, where every game matters, and you're playing the Chiefs with Tony Romo on CBS, to the freaking Titans that get Beth Mowins calling the games, it may be a tough sell. That's how I get better players. And so I'm like, you know what? This is what they should do. And the midday show, oh, no. They need to be getting younger. They need to be getting cheaper. They need to be getting, you can't have it your way all the time. There's only so many guys that are out there that can play at a starter's level in the NFL. Again, Derek might be right. PFF says Jalen Ramsey was the 16th graded corner last year out of 233. 16th is not elite. I will agree with that. But 16th is absolutely a starting player in the NFL. Well, Jalen Ramsey might be a pain in the ass. You're right. He might be a pain in the tush. But guess what? Could he be any less of a pain than L'Jarius Sneed? Everybody wants to be able to pick the best players and stick them out there and, it'll be fine. But the problem is with the Titans, they've whiffed so many times. And people will say, it's all John Robinson's fault. Yeah, maybe the guard you took in 2023 and the running back without the ACL who's still a backup and the quarterback that you can't get rid of fast enough, maybe that's going to hurt you too. Maybe the fact that you had a chance at Brock Bowers last year and you took a right tackle instead. Maybe that's the problem. But again, you can't worry about the spilt milk. You have to look at where you are now. See, I would have solved this, and I know everybody gets mad every time I say this, but I would have solved this by signing Sam Darnold, because then I would have traded the number 1 overall pick. And I would have extra second round picks and third round picks and everything else because I would have traded the pick to the Giants, and they probably would have given me a first rounder in next year's draft, and they probably would have given me a third in this year's draft, and I would have moved back with the Giants, and I'd be sitting there at 3, and I'd have my future picks. And then I can go get a receiver at 3, or I can go get a corner at 3, or I can go get a pass rusher at 3, or I can trade it again to 7, or I would have had options. But the Titans didn't want that. So I'm not allowed to sign Sam Darnold to eliminate the biggest need on the team so that I can then use my number 1 draft pick and get a bunch of picks to help supplement the team. I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that. So I have to take Cam Ward. And I'm not allowed to go sign Jalen Ramsey. And I'm not allowed to go get Mark Andrews. So what's the plan here? Like, this is the question I would ask the midday show. What's the plan? If I've got the worst roster in the NFL, according to The Athletic, and I've got 1 pick at 35, because, again, I'm using the first pick on my quarterback, how do I build a better team? How do I get an edge rusher? How do I get a corner to replace L'Jarius Sneed? Because, again, how can you count on L'Jarius Sneed with his knee injury and his legal problems? How do I get a tight end? What's the answer here? And again, I think their answer is going to be, well, just play Chig, play Burks, play Baker. I played Burks and Chig and Baker. I was the worst team in the league last year. I need better players, but I'm not allowed to have them. I'm not allowed to go get Sam Darnold. I'm not allowed to go get Jalen Ramsey. I'm not allowed to go get Mark Andrews. I'm not allowed to get any of these guys. But Jared, you said that you value draft capital. Yes, good draft capital. I don't give a rat's ass about swapping spots in the 5th round in order to get Mark Andrews or Jalen Ramsey as a salary dump. But I'm not allowed to. I'm only supposed to have bad players, apparently. I'm not allowed to get good players. So now I have to hope that I can draft in the 5th round starting NFL players when 77% of starting NFL players, 77. That is 8 out of 10 come from rounds 1 through 3. 615-737-1025, and our phone line is driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com at 615-737-1025. Joel says, I'm not an expert on Texas law. Neither am I. But if I had to guess, if he doesn't have any previous violent felonies, he'll probably get a suspended sentence and be on probation for several years and have to do community service and pay restitution. A big problem for the DA if it goes to trial is who was the actual shooter if it was of the two. Again, here's what I'll say on the Snead front. If they've got proof of the shooting and it's Snead's car, he's going to get suspended by the league. And if he gets suspended by the league, you have to decide, are you moving on or are you not? Because if he gets suspended by the league, you can get out of the $19 million in salary and the $7.5 million that's guaranteed for next year. You can get out of that and you get that money back. And then maybe they'll let me spend it on Jalen Ramsey. But I can do that. But if he's on the roster week 1, his $19 million guarantees. That's already guaranteed now, but I'm assuming won't be because of the suspension. That's what you really need to worry about. And again, I just don't think that there's any chance that L'Jarius Sneed is ever going to help this team. In fact, I don't even think L'Jarius Sneed will ever play a snap for the Titans ever again. One texter says, Jared, what would you think of trading back and to keep trading back as far as they can while staying in the top 100? So we did our first mock draft simulation. We'll do one every day between now and next Friday, where, again, the Titans are on the clock, and we know they're going to take Cam Ward. What we did last year with the mock draft simulation was we had the first 6 picks go, and then we were on the clock at 7, and we could trade back, and we could trade up, and we could – and it's not as much fun in the first round this year because we all know who the Titans are taking, but we did it with 35, and I moved from 35 to 43 and then made a pick at 43, picked up 70 or 42, picked up a pick at 73, moved it back to 75, added a pick at 100, and was able to walk away with 4 players in the first 2 nights of the draft. I don't think that's a bad idea. But you also have to know, hey, like, this is the guy we want, and if that guy's there, go take him. One texter says, to me, Simmons is worth more than whatever value he would have on the trade market, and it's not like the Titans are loaded with talent, so I'm unsure of the overall reason to part with him. So PK had a report when it came to Simmons today in which he talked to 2 execs from other teams that tell him that there's no sense that Jeffrey Simmons is on the trade market, and one of them said that he thinks Simmons would be worth a second or a third. I think Simmons is worth more to you than a second or a third. Even though, as Gunnar said, I'm sick of Jeffrey Simmons, I'm sick of Jeffrey Simmons too. That's why. I'm sick of him too. I get it. I don't disagree. 615-737-1025. That is our phone number, 615-737-1025. And apparently there's one draft prospect who keeps falling. And I know why it is. We'll get to that next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106 for the game.
I'm very uncomfortable with what has happened with Shador Sanders. I understand it's the NFL draft, and I understand things happen, and you evaluate, you scout, you see what you see. I get that part. We talked about Cam Ward. We went literally from talking about whether or not him or Cam Ward should be the number 1 overall pick, to Shador Sanders being a top 3 pick, to Shador Sanders possibly falling to number 6. Then we hear number 9 at New Orleans. Now we're talking about the Steelers at number 21. What the hell happened? Last time I checked, he ain't playing any games. Had a pro day that went pretty well. What did he do to drop? And see, I listened to you. I've listened to Prime speaking about this in the past. And of course, Louis Riddick speaking about this. And here's the thing that I want to use this as an opportunity to remind everybody. Primetime Deion Sanders might be the greatest athlete, clearly one of the greatest athletes that we've ever seen in history. Best cornerback ever. We got that part. You know what Ryan Clark and Louis Riddick and others raved about? All the bravado and all of this other stuff, the professionalism, the dedication, the excellence and commitment, all of these intangibles that supposedly we look for in any athlete, especially the quarterback. This brother seems to have it. And as the days progress, his stature or his status seems to dwindle. I find it inexplicable. I find it alarming. And I find it like almost insulting from the standpoint that this is Deion Sanders' son we're talking about here.
Stephen A's pissed. Stephen A is pissed that Deion Sanders' son might be falling in the NFL draft. And I have said this for a while, and every time I say this, Joe Rexrode gets mad. But I have said Shador Sanders is a TV prospect. I do not think Shador Sanders is an elite NFL draft prospect. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not an NFL draft prospect, because he is going to go in the first 3 rounds of the draft. But again, it's like Stephen A said, how did we go from talking about Shador Sanders and Cam Ward to then Shador Sanders, is he 2, is he 3, to then Shador Sanders maybe going to 6, to then Shador Sanders maybe going to 9, to now Shador Sanders going at 21. Stephen A is offended. He doesn't understand. But that's because Stephen A is a TV host. He's not a football guy. Trevor Sikkema is the head draft analyst at Pro Football Focus. He came on our show at the Super Bowl, and I asked him about the quarterbacks when it was Ward and Sanders, and that's all anyone talked about. And he said, he goes, I've got a low 2nd, high 3rd round grade on Shador Sanders. And I said, what? A low 2nd round grade on Shador Sanders? Again, this is a guy who does draft analysis for a living, not Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith does not do draft analysis for a living. Even though Stephen A. Smith talks about the draft, he's a TV entertainer. That's what he is. And that's why Shador has been worth talking about. Shador is a TV prospect because Shador Sanders, regardless of whether or not you like Shador Sanders, he's polarizing. Everybody knows who he is. We watched him play at Colorado. We know who his father is. There are opinions to be had one way or another. So people have all these opinions about Shador Sanders, and they say, oh, yeah, he's awesome. And then we say, wait a minute, he hadn't played anybody any good. And every time he does play somebody good, he gets his butt kicked. Oh, you're just a hater. And then it turns into a debate, which, again, is great for TV. It's like when some washed-up vet signs a 1-year up to $3.5 million contract with the Dallas Cowboys. And then there's talk about, what is this guy going to do on the Dallas Cowboys? Well, 5 years ago, he would have been an impact player. Now he'll catch about 3 passes. That's what this is. Those are TV players. And the Cowboys are a TV team. And Shador is a TV prospect. And every time I bring this up, Joe Rexrode gets mad. He's not a TV prospect. You think all those guys out there just say they say because they're friends with Deion Sanders? I mean, Stephen A is offended by the notion that Shador Sanders may go with the 21st pick in the draft. Offended. Why? Because he's friends with Dion. Louis Riddick thinks the only difference between Cam Ward, who he compares to Mahomes, and Shador Sanders is that Cam throws the ball harder than Shador does. Well, he's friends with Deion Sanders. You see what I'm saying? Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, he's not friends with Shador Sanders. Second round, third round grade on him. Blake Bedingfield, the former Titans director of college scouting, the guy that convinced him to draft Derrick Henry. Blake Bedingfield is not friends with Deion Sanders. He has a second round grade on Shador. And he wrote today at paulkaharski.com, quote, if Sanders doesn't go to the Saints, he may be a day 2 pick. Remember, an imperfect draft with imperfect prospects. I'm just going to say this right now. If Shador Sanders falls out of the first round, and I don't think he will, but he might. If Shador Sanders falls out of the first round, Stephen A is going to blow a gasket the next morning on TV. But again, he's a TV host. He's not a football guy. The football guys are all like, yeah, Shador's not that good. The guys that are friends with Dion think, oh, he's so good. How could you not take him? I mean, Ryan Clark says I have to take him. Oh, okay. Ryan Clark, that's who I'm basing it all on. Got it. He's a TV prospect who may go in round 2. And we were talking at the beginning of this, is he worth the number 1 pick? But again, that's what I've been saying the whole time. Shador's a TV prospect. Joe gets mad every time I say it, but I think it's true. And I think this is fascinating that Shador keeps falling. And apparently the Saints at 9 aren't interested. Now, I'll believe that when I see it. When they don't take Shador Sanders at 9. But if they don't take Shador Sanders at 9, then the watch will be on about how far he will slide down in this draft. And I also have to say, this whole Shador Sanders getting his number retired at Colorado, and Dion got asked a bunch of questions about it, and Dion was like, it's not worth talking about. No. I mean, the reason people are offended by Shador Sanders getting his number retired at Colorado is because we all know he's not that good. If they just said, hey, Travis Hunter's getting his number retired, he won the Heisman Trophy. Got it. But Shador beat one ranked team in overtime, and that team went 7-5 that year. And he got his jersey retired? Give me a break. That is appeasement if I've ever seen it. Get on your knees and kiss Dion's feet. All mangled and deformed. And that's what Stephen A does. But again, the football people are like, yeah, no, not going to risk my career on Shador Sanders. Chad Withrow from OutKick joins us next on the program. Fireball Hot Take Friday continues. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, 1025, 1063. The game streaming live on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook Live. We are live from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville Studios on a Fireball Hot Take Friday, and we are presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee. 1 week from today, we will be trying to figure out what the Titans are going to do with the 35th pick. We already kind of know what they're going to do at number 1 overall. 1 week ago today, we were learning the bombshell of the Tennessee and Nico Iamaleava impending divorce. And now we have some of the fallout. It looks like Nico's going to UCLA and Tennessee. Who knows? Chad Withrow joins us now from OutKick, presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee, your bank for small business. Chad, we start there. I saw a report from Pete Nakos at On3 that a lot of ACC, a lot of Big Ten, a lot of Big 12 quarterbacks are starting to get pay raises or starting to get new contracts, kind of like coaches. When a big SEC job comes open, I do wonder, where is Tennessee headed on the transfer portal? How do you feel now that the dust is settling as far as the Nico thing is concerned? How do you feel about Tennessee's path forward?
Well, unlike what Urban Meyer had to say about it, which doesn't surprise me at all, that he would have done whatever the player wanted to keep him there and then not cared about any character concerns or leadership issues or anything else, given his track record with guys like, Aaron Hernandez. I can see him saying those things. I think Tennessee did the right thing. I think Josh Heupel did the right thing. I don't think Tennessee's any better today than they were before Nico left, but I do think there's a lot to be said for team chemistry and respecting the coach when things go sideways, and I think they've got a little bit more of that. Now, you got to have more than 2 scholarship quarterbacks, so that's now the next step. We know Nico's going to UCLA, so who is Tennessee going to bring in? And the longer this goes, Jared, the more I think it's going to be more of a depth piece that can compete for the starting job, and not someone that once you see the name, you're going to be like, oh, they're going to be the starter. Because it's a difficult ask what Tennessee's going through right now. It's very late in the game. We had Shannon Terry on our show today, and Shannon Terry said if they were really feeling this way, Nico should have just left right after the season.
Yeah.
There should have been no demands made, and okay, we're not going to pay you, so now you sit around for spring practice. That would have been better for Nico. It would have been a little bit more understandable. It would have been bad for Tennessee, and he wouldn't have looked great, but everybody would have understood it a little bit more had it gone the traditional route. And then Tennessee could have gone out in that early portal and tried to lure a player in to come in for spring and summer. But now you're trying to pay for a guy. Basically, you're saying, let's go get a guy to kind of do the same thing that Nico was doing, to be in it for the money, that's going to leave his team as the starting quarterback right now after completing all of spring practice, to come here for summer workouts and fall camp and try to rush to being the starting quarterback in Josh Heupel's system. It's a tough ask. I don't think it's as simple. I do think that they're probably, through their Spire Collective, reaching out to a number of agents of starting quarterbacks in the Big 12 and the ACC, and I think they are going to get a raise for a lot of quarterbacks. There may be one in this whole situation that it's sort of like an arbitration, right? They go to their coach and say, hey, Tennessee's offering me this. Can I get a little bit more money? And then they don't have the money, or they say, no, you're not good enough to do it. Then they get upset and go to Tennessee for that reason. I don't know where it's headed, but the longer it goes, the more I feel like it's going to be someone that's going to come in and be able to compete with Jake Merklinger and with George McIntyre, but not this no-brainer current starting quarterback that's going to get paid $2.5 million, $3 million to come to Tennessee and be the starter. Because I think it's tough for somebody to leave their team right now, given what we just saw with Nico.
Are you anticipating a lost season as far as the Vols are concerned?
I'm anticipating that I wouldn't say lost season. I don't think it's going to be as good as it could have been with Nico. Had Nico been the leader of the team and happy and progressed from last year. I mean, let's go back to last year. There's a lot being said about Nico being bad. He had a fine season. It was a good season for a first-year starting quarterback. It was statistically worse than what Josh Heupel had with Hendon Hooker and Joe Milton. But he's a redshirt. It's the youngest guy to start also. Those guys have been around college football a while before they got the starting gig. He's a redshirt freshman coming in. They get to the playoff. He had a good year. It wasn't a great year. He's no superstar. This was the year that he could have been a superstar had he played this right and had he played it right throughout. You're not going to have a superstar quarterback this year for Tennessee. I don't think you have a superstar running back like you had last year in Dylan Sampson. So I have a hard time seeing how the offense is going to be better. Now, I'll also say in Josh Heupel's offense, whoever the running back is seems to have a huge year. So I think that Deshaun Bishop and Peyton Lewis and the guys who are going to get the bulk of the carries are still going to be good running the ball, and they're going to have a good rushing attack. But who's going to be the quarterback? How good is Jake Merklinger? I have no idea. And I'm just hard-pressed to believe that even if they get a guy who's a current starter, that he's going to come in and in day one, they play Georgia, I think, in week 2 or 3 at Neyland Stadium, that guy's going to be good enough at that point in the season to get a huge win like that against Georgia. So this went from being a 10-2, 9-3 possible type team to probably being more 8-4 ceiling, 6-6 type team at the floor.
Looking back on it, do you think that Tennessee made a mistake in investing as much in Nico as they did, given the fact that clearly off the field, Nico's head is not in the right place?
Yes. I think in retrospect, yes. They invested long-term in the wrong situation. Nico has the talent. He's got every physical trait you'd want to see in a quarterback. And I think he has the ability to do it. I don't think it was wrong in theory. I think Josh Heupel with the Tennessee collective, Spire Sports, got together and Josh Heupel says, hey, this is the guy who could be a top NFL pick. He's the perfect trait quarterback for my system. Let's go get him. And then Spire Sports being proactive and Tennessee sort of on the cutting edge of a lot of things. NIL saying, we're going to sort of set the going rate for a number 1, number 2 in the country type quarterback, 5-star guy for a multi-year deal for a team. So they get that $2 to $2.5 million per year deal. They sign Nico. They pay him $2 million to sit the bench for a year as a redshirt quarterback. And then all these little things that you start hearing now about in public start to creep out. The dad was always around practice. Every time he had an autograph signing or a paid appearance as part of his NIL deal, he'd get on the phone with his dad, and his dad would tell him to leave, and his dad would cuss out whoever asked him to go. All these different things you start hearing about the situation that I think Tennessee knew pretty quickly this could be a big problem and just hoped that it would sort of go away or that Big Nick would stop some of the things he was doing. And it never did. And it eventually blew up in everybody's face. And now Nico looks really dumb, and he's made a really bad decision. He's going to make less money now to play for a much worse team with much worse prospects and go play for an offense that a year ago finished 118th in the country, where he was on a team that had the 15th best offense in America, a playoff team, coming back with some receivers he knows, a system he knows. So he misplayed the situation completely. And I think it's a big cautionary tale about when you get in bed with these quarterbacks that have this daddy ball situation. I call it travel ball daddy. That's what Big Nick is. Buyer beware for all those teams. I think everyone's looking at Tennessee and Nico right now, and both are sort of this cautionary tale about what to do and what not to do. But at the same time, I think Josh Heupel is going to get a lot of praise in the meantime for saying, yeah, enough is enough. We're going to move on. We wish him the best. And by the way, I think Josh Heupel liked Nico. I think they had a good working relationship with each other. I don't think there were any personal issues with those two. I think it was 90% the father that was the problem.
What do you make of Nico's camp coming out and saying it wasn't the money, it was the offense?
It's hilarious. Look, I think the offense was part of it, but he definitely asked for more money too. But the offense being part of it, he was making demands about offensive line replacements and go get this receiver or that receiver. Well, Jerry, in recruiting and even in NIL, you can't just go decide, we're going to get this guy, and this guy. Hey, we're going to go get Carnell Tate from Ohio State, right? We're going to go pay him whatever he asked for to leave. He may not want to leave, right? The guy may pick Georgia over Tennessee. Those things happen in recruiting. So you can't just snap your finger and give any one player everything he needs. And that offensive line, by the way, was good enough to block for the leading rusher in the conference a year ago. They were good enough to have the 15th best offense in America. They were good enough to go to the college football playoff. It's going to be a lot worse at UCLA. They're in for a rude awakening. And there's no perfect offensive line out there. There's no offensive line where you can get behind them and play SEC games and not get hit. The best offensive lines give up huge hits. So I don't know what perfect situation he's looking for, but the whole thing about the offense, and then I hear other people going to bat for him, and it's really Cordell Andrews, the handler, that's leaking all this info. And I saw another reporter say something about, it's not the offensive production or stats. It's Josh Heupel's inability to get guys ready for the next level. Well, look, Josh Heupel at Tennessee alone took Hendon Hooker, who couldn't start at Virginia Tech, and got him drafted. He took Joe Milton, who couldn't start at Michigan, and got him drafted. And Joe Milton just got traded to be the backup quarterback for the Cowboys after one good game with the Patriots. So it's not like it's all bad from an NFL perspective either. And also, if the offense was a problem, you signed up for a multi-year contract for a guy that's running the same offense he was when you signed up for it. So at every turn, Jared, the Iamaleava camp just looks dumber and dumber, and that's another example.
Here's the thing I can't get over, which is if you didn't like the offense, then why did you ask for the $4 million? If you didn't like the offense, why didn't you leave at the end of the year? I mean, did he think Josh Heupel was going to change the scheme? Did he think Josh Heupel was going to say, you know what, everything I've done for the last 20 years, I'm going to stop doing, and I'm going to change the offense, and we're going to run the West Coast offense, and I'm going to pretend I'm Kyle Shanahan? Did he think that was going to happen? That's what I don't understand. And to me, if you are a media person and you are perpetuating what you said, again, the idea that, well, Josh Heupel doesn't get quarterbacks drafted high, or, well, the offense is holding us back, then why didn't you leave after last year? Why did you then ask repeatedly for $4 million? I have a hard time with that. I also have a hard time with Nico's dad a week ago saying all this was fake news from Pete Nakos and On3. And now Cordell Landers is saying that On3 is all fake news and run by Tennessee guys, when On3 was right at the very beginning of all of this. Like, their report was right. I have a hard time with all of that.
Yeah, we had Pete Nakos on earlier in the week. We had Shannon Terry on today. And Nakos, we asked him, have you ever dealt with anything like this before? And he said no. I mean, he's a young reporter too, but he's like, I've never had and he said to us, look, what he put publicly is far more tame than what he texted me privately, which was awful. You know, it started out with lose my number and then just went off on the guy, berating him, borderline threatening him. Here's what they can't admit, Jared, is everything you're saying is true, and it makes no sense, and it doesn't track. But what they can't say is, oh, well, we want new offensive lineman, receiver, this, that. Well, we can't do all those things you want. Okay, well, we want $4 million then to stay. Because we can be okay with the offense if you double our pay, because that's what they think Carson Beck is making. I'm not so sure Carson Beck is making all $4 million this year, but it goes back to these are completely different circumstances. If you are desperate for a quarterback in the transfer market and you can get a guy in that early portal period right after the season ends and bring him in, Cam Ward to Miami, Carson Beck to Miami, you're going to pay top dollar, and that's the market for that level of a transfer quarterback, one-year savior type guy with a good roster that's capable of making the playoffs. When you sign a multi-year deal, when you invest in a 17-year-old kid at the time, and you say you're going to make $2 million to not play for a year, it's a different level of investment. And I don't think Big Nick and his team were smart enough to understand any of that. And that's what's really sad in all this. Nico is probably a kid who's always done exactly what his dad said and just goes along with it. And I don't know that he wanted to do this. I don't know that he ever wanted to go to Tennessee originally. Sure. I don't know that he ever liked Knoxville. He may have wanted to stay on the West Coast originally. He may be perfectly fine with going back to UCLA. No one knows, because no one really knows what Nico thinks or wants, because what Nico thinks and wants is exactly what his dad thinks and wants. And his dad is an unreliable narrator in the life of this kid. And it's really sad to me to see that and how things just completely disintegrated. And now when we say Nico Iamaleava, because if he doesn't go on to have a great pro career, when we say the name Nico, it's not going to be quarterbacking the team to a college football playoff. It's going to be the cautionary tale of being selfish, greedy, not understanding your own market, not understanding your own place in that market, all of these things. And I feel bad for the kid for that reason. But when you go along with the father and the father's making bad decisions, these are the results.
Can we make a dad-to-dad pact here, Chad?
Yes.
If I ever act like Nico's dad, will you kick me square in the balls?
Yeah, I'll do the same. I'd rather take a knee to the crotch instead of a foot. So I'll allow you to knee me right in the balls if I ever behave this way at all. And also just to not understand, like, this is a really good situation. I mean, it'd be one thing if he went somewhere and it's like, oh my gosh, you know, we can't win a game. We can't. You just went to the playoffs. Like, all you had to do was grin and bear it for 1 year, be a good leader, run the offense, improve. I think the receiving core this year is more talented. They're not as proven, but there's more athleticism and talent. That receiving core could be an improvement for Tennessee. Just do the job, and you're gone. All you had to do, a matter of months. I mean, thinking about that, you're going to make $2.5 million. By the way, I think Tennessee was willing to give him a little bit of a raise, not $4 million, but let's say he makes $3 million for the year. And now he's going to make 1.2 or 1.3 or whatever the reports are in California with that state income tax to go play at UCLA, a team replacing all of their offensive linemen, 4 of their 5 pass catchers, both of their running backs are gone, and an offensive play caller who, when he calls Nico's first play, will be the first he's ever called this year.
I mean, Chip Kelly left to go be an OC. Like, what does that tell you about the state of UCLA's program?
He's going to play in front of 25,000 people in an 80,000 seat stadium, at the Rose Bowl. It's mind-boggling how bad of a decision this was for someone. And look, this is a really good job, if you look at it that way, for quarterback for this year at Tennessee for someone, but it's a hard sell, right? You got to really find the right person, because if someone were to leave their team, I mean, they're doing the same thing Nico just did. They're leaving their team high and dry after spring ball to go to Tennessee. So it's a tough spot that the Vols are in right now. And I think the best case scenario is that Merklinger or McIntyre can get the job done. But regardless, you can't go into a season with 2 scholarship quarterbacks. They're gonna have to find someone, even if that someone's a backup.
Yeah. Chad Withrow with us. The hot seat is next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Chad Withrow from OutKick with us, presented by the Southern Bank of Tennessee, your bank for small business. Chad, do you have a thought, or do you want to go right to the hot seat?
Let's get to it.
Number one, how far will Shador Sanders fall in the draft next Thursday?
I have a hard time seeing him get past the Saints at 9. I've seen a lot more projections with that going on. I know there's a lot of talk out there about Steelers at 21 possibly, or him dropping completely out of the first round. I'm not buying that yet. I still think he's going to be the second quarterback taken in this draft. So I don't think he lasts past number 9 with the New Orleans Saints.
Number two, what do you make of Jackson Dart being removed as one of the draft night attendees?
I think it's interesting when guys decide to go versus when they decide not to go. Like the Jalen Milroe thing being there is really interesting. And I also wonder, is it like a sponsor deal? Do they have someone that pays for them to go? Does the league pay for it because they need guys there, you know, for the television angle of it? Because we all
I'm sure the league pays for it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's like a sponsorship angle too. I don't think it's just like covering your room and board and your flight. Anyway, you know, I don't make much of it. Here's what I make about Jackson Dart. Those final games at Ole Miss that were rough to watch, right? Some big moments in big games where he was just terrible. After having a really productive career at Ole Miss, he was really bad in the end. But I don't make much of it when guys decide not to go. I make more of it for the guys who decide to go, like a Jalen Milroe.
Number three, what do we make of the Tennessee Titans pick at 35? And who is the one guy that if they fall out of the first round, you would absolutely take with the 35th pick?
So what's the problem with Luther Burden? Because I don't understand why the Titans would not take him at 35 if he's there.
They
Like,
say there's some off-the-field concerns. What those are, I don't know.
I mean, well, they just had a star cornerback shoot up a car dealership. So, I mean, do off-field concerns really concern? I don't think Luther Burden's done that, is my point. I don't want to make light of that situation, but I just think he's a phenomenal player. I mean, I loved him at Missouri. He's just playmaker, speed, gives you so many added elements that you need. Now, look, Tyreek Hill was an absolute turd coming out of college and has continued to be that. He's also a terrific pro receiver and
Sure.
has been great everywhere he's been, right? So I don't think he's Tyreek Hill from an off-field standpoint. I think he could be really good in the NFL. I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill from a speed and talent standpoint either, but he's pretty close from what I saw at Missouri. So I'm going with him. That's a guy that I'd love for the Titans to take. If he's there at 35, you get Cam Ward at number 1, and you get Luther Burden and pair those two together. I would love that pick for the Titans.
Number 4, what is your current opinion of Bill Belichick, especially given the 24-year-old girlfriend and her involvement in North Carolina's football program?
I mean, this is a case of being whipped to the highest order. I've rarely seen someone so just brainwashed by the whole situation as what you've seen with Bill Belichick. Like, I don't think he really understands what's going on in this situation at all as to, you know, why a 24-year-old would be attracted to him in this way. I'm like, gee, I wonder what it could be, why she would be there with him. So it's not even like a midlife crisis, which I think, you know, a lot of people have to some extent, various extents for all middle-aged men. This is a late life crisis from Bill Belichick, and look, more power to him. He has what he wants in this situation, but it's really strange when you see those videos of his 24-year-old girlfriend in her white knee-high boots marching on and off the field at practice at North Carolina. I just think this is going to be, if this flames out, which I'm starting to think it might more and more with Bill Belichick, and it's a quick tenure, we're going to start hearing and reading so many athletic stories and stuff about just her involvement in the program and how crazy it was in their short time in Chapel Hill. That's where I feel like the story is headed.
Here's what I can't get over. Do you think that when Bill was coaching the Patriots, like in the prime of the Patriots, that he would have ever let Tom Brady bring Giselle to the facility? That like he would have ever let Brady bring Giselle to work? You know the answer to that. And so that I can't get over. And number 2, the FOIA requests or whatever that had the emails show the girlfriend emailing North Carolina saying, we need to block and get rid of everybody who says something negative about Bill Belichick on the Twitter. And Bill then replied and was like, how could North Carolina condone people calling me a predator? Bill Belichick, Mr. Ignore the Noise, is sitting here worried about what Johnny Joseph on Twitter says. What happened to Bill Belichick?
Hey, it's a new Bill Belichick. He takes photographs now as a fisherman, reeling in a mermaid with his 24-year-old girlfriend. He takes hamstring photos of him getting her to plank on his feet, holding her above him on the beach. Like, this is a new man. This is an all-new Bill that we're seeing. This is not the Bill that was a tyrant in New England and ran things his way and wouldn't let anyone else do anything else. We're seeing a completely new Belichick. Here's the other question I have. What does his son think of all this, who's on his staff? Imagine being his kid. Right? You've got the mom from the first marriage, and you're a lot older than your dad's 24-year-old girlfriend who's walking around like she's the event coordinator of all things North Carolina football. That's got to be a weird situation for him.
Number 5, what are your thoughts on L'Jarius Sneed's revelation of the off-the-field incident in December in Texas?
It's another sign that the Titans need some good news at some point. I mean, goodness gracious. It's just been one hit after another, I feel like. And with a guy who had injury concerns before they brought him here and then was injured all year and then had this, I think what every other Titan fan that, has a brain about it thinks is it's a really bad look for a franchise that went to bat for him and he has not delivered anything yet. And then to have an off-field incident like this, it's not good.
I just want to know what he was thinking. TD said that he was uncomfortable at a gas station because the guy at the car dealership kind of mean mugged him and his friend. And then they drove back to the gas station, or they drove back to the car dealership and shot it up, allegedly. What were you thinking? Go home. Also, on top of that, if you were the Titans and the commissioner suspended him, would you release Sneed and avoid the guaranteed money?
I mean, it depends on how long the suspension was.
That doesn't matter to me at all. I'm more worried about the knee than I am the suspension.
Yeah, look, it looks like another mistake. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway for me is not to even get into the details of what exactly he did there's no real great motive for an NFL player with as much to lose as him being in a car that goes and shoots up a car dealership and somebody being okay with that, like he got mean mugged. That's justification for shooting up the dealership. There's no good rationale or smart rationale as to why it happened. I think they should be done with mistakes, so I'd be fine with them releasing it.
Last one for you. What did you make of Rory McIlroy's comeback on Sunday? Well, his comeback, choke job, comeback, choke job, comeback. And do you think Rory McIlroy would have ever won a major again had he choked away the Masters?
I think he would have eventually won one because he's been playing too well to not to. But what I think about that whole day was it made it that much more special. It was like gut-wrenching to watch him blow the putt that would have won it on 18. But then for him to go right back to start the 18th over in the playoffs and beat Justin Rose, it just made the moment so much bigger that he did have to overcome the disaster on 13. Right, where it looked like he was going to coast up 4 strokes. He's on the 13th, and then suddenly he's tied. And at one point, he's actually behind 1 stroke. And that whole back and forth down the last 4 or 5 holes was remarkable. So I think it just adds to the legend of the comeback for Rory McIlroy, going over a decade in between majors, getting his first green jacket. I love it because in the end, all's well that ends well. And it adds the story that he choked on the 18th and was able to overcome it. Because I'll be honest, the moment he missed that short putt to win it on 18, I said, he's done. He's in my mind. I mean, there's no way.
Oh, I thought there was no way he was going to win. No way he was going to win.
And then Justin Rose, right now, he's a 3-time runner-up, twice lost in the playoffs. So now he's kind of the one at his way. He's 44 years old, I think. I mean, he's probably not going to have another chance. But man, what a final round.
Chad Withrow from OutKick, presented by the Southern Bacon, Tennessee. Chad, great stuff. Have a great weekend. We'll talk soon.
Jared, always fun. Have a great weekend as well, and we'll talk to you next Friday.
Yep, Chad Withrow on our program. Stillman and Company. Andrew Burnett asked about his job status. We'll touch on it next. Stillman and Company, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Stillman and Company, Andrew Burnett is having his end of the season press conference. And if you were wondering, again, I have guaranteed, just based on the conversations I've had, I believe Andrew Burnett is coming back as the head coach of the Nashville Predators. But he was asked about his job status at his end of the year press conference. Andrew Burnett has said that he will continue to coach the Predators until he is told otherwise, says he has not yet met with Barry Trotz, and that his expectation is that they will meet next week. He said he's talked to every player on the team over the last 2 days about their games and where they need to go, and says that he has the commitment of the core group of players as far as next season is concerned. So again, kind of the big news, the underlying news right here is Andrew Burnett says he does not know whether or not he's going to be retained as coach. Let me just say this. I am convinced Andrew Burnett will remain as the Predators coach for next year. But if anything happens like last year, if they start off 0-5 again, gone. I mean, if they start off 0-3, he's probably gone. But we will know more next week when Barry Trotz talks about it, which happens to also be the week of the NFL draft. Because 1 week from right now, we will be preparing for round 2, the 35th pick, the real mystery as far as what the Titans are going to do. That's it for us. We are out of here today. Vanderbilt baseball against Georgia is next. Stillman and Company, have a great weekend. We'll see everybody Monday at 2.